be connected.
So are we all ready to go?
Yes, Chair, we're ready to go. Thank you.
Yes, just checking because the answer phone came on from somebody. Okay, so I will start again. Good morning. Welcome to West Devon Borough Council's Virtual Development Management Committee meeting, our first one held in this platform. I'm your chairman. My name is Councillor Julie Yelland and the Vice Chairman is Councillor Terry Pearce. So before we start, I'd just like to go through a bit of brief housekeeping for everybody's information. Please could I ask all attendees to mute your microphones, to reduce background noise, and please only use the chat box to indicate if you wish to declare an interest, raise a question, or take part in the debate. If you lose internet connection, then the meeting will be adjourned briefly to allow you to come back online. The meeting is being live streamed to YouTube. However, for obvious reasons, it won't be possible to adjourn the meeting in the event that members of the public or press lose internet connection. Our applications this morning will follow our usual procedure as they would if we were in the chamber, with a case officer presenting their report, followed by any pre-registered speakers being invited to speak for up to 3 minutes, with a ward member being able to speak for up to 5 minutes. Members of the committee will then be able to question each speaker on points of clarity if they so wish. Speakers will be invited into the committee at the beginning of each planning application and then return to the lobby once a decision has been reached, and those speakers will be most welcome to continue to listen to the rest of the meeting via the live stream. The recommendation will be moved and seconded, which will enable debate, and at the conclusion of the debate on each application I shall call for the vote. The Democratic Services Officer will then call each councillor who is in attendance to confirm that they were present for the entire item and take their vote for, against or abstain. Please could I remind members that if anyone is minded to vote against a recommendation resulting in the application being refused, then you will need to be prepared to give clear reasons for refusal, supported by the relevant policies from the Joint Local Plan, as that is what will be relied on in any subsequent appeal. If any member has a disclosable pecuniary interest, then you will need to leave the meeting for the duration of the relevant application and will be required to disconnect from the call. You will then be invited back to the meeting once that application has been determined. Please could I remind members to remain focused on the application being considered and to keep questions and comments short and to the point. The minute taker will find it harder than normal to identify who is speaking and what is being said, so please do speak clearly and at a reasonable pace. When an officer wishes to speak, they will indicate using the chat facility. I am now going to ask Mrs. Hall to take a roll call to make sure that all can hear and be heard and to confirm the meeting is quorate. Thank you, Mrs. Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Can I do roll call on the members first, please? Councillor Cheadle.
I'm present and can hear properly.
Thank you. Councillor Crozier.
Present and can hear.
Thank you. Councillor Hipsey.
Present and I can hear too.
Thank you. Councillor Mott.
Present.
Councillor Moyes.
Present and can hear.
Councillor Pearce.
Present and can hear clearly.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
I am present and I can hear.
Councillor Renders.
Yes, present and can hear.
Councillor Vachon.
Present and can hear.
And Councillor Yelland.
I'm present and can hear.
Thank you. And can I just say, for clarification for those listening to this meeting, the following officers are also on the call: Mr. Fairburn, the Borough Solicitor; Mr. Weimer, Head of Development Management; Mr. Gibbons, who's a Planning Case Officer; Ms. Young, who is the Gatekeeper; and myself, Mrs. Hall, Democratic Services Officer. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Chair, you're mute.
thank you. We will start off with any apologies for absence, Mrs. Hall.
We have no apologies for absence. We have a full committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh yes, and just a further officer is Mr. Baker from the Joint Local Plan team. Is also here as well. Okay. Any declarations of interest, members? I will kick off as I have two to declare. So I need to declare a personal interest in two applications this morning. Application 223219, which is the one situated in Broadmoor Lane, Oakhampton. As I understand, the applicant and my son actually know each other and are friends. Application 347219, FUL 129 Station Road. I also declare a personal interest as I am one of the ward members. Both applications have been considered by Oakhampton Town Council as a statutory consultee, and I am a member of the Town Council. I confirm that I didn't take part in the debate and I abstained from the vote on both the applications, and I have come to this meeting with an open mind and ready to listen to the views of all parties here today. Are there any further declarations of interest?
Yes, can I declare an interest with 409219 FUL? I'm a ward member there, but I don't think it's really that relevant.
Thank you. Any
Hello,
further
Chair. Paul Vashon. I declare an interest in the application on Station Road, 129 Station Road. That is, I'm just getting the right one, 3472.
Thank you, and that is because you're a ward member, yes?
I'm a ward member, yes.
Thank you. Any further applications?
I would declare a personal interest in all applications as I'm a member of the management of the Devon Building Control Partnership.
Thank you. Anybody else? Lovely. Thank you. Item number 3, items requiring urgent attention. There are none at the moment. Item 4, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of March. Are there any errors or omissions that members would like to draw my attention to? If not, is everybody happy that I sign the minutes?
Aye.
Thank you. If anybody is not happy, please could you state? It's probably the easier way. Lovely, thank you, Reg. I will sign them in due course when we've worked out how to do that. Okay, so for the first planning item on the agenda, which is due to start at 9:30, Mrs. Hall, can you confirm if we have our registered speakers, if they are present, please?
Yes, I believe we have. Can I just ask the gatekeeper, Janice, do we?
Thank you. Chair, we are having some difficulties getting through to Councillor Goffey, who is the Town Councillor, but we're working on that at the moment.
Okay. I think we need to just call a pause until we actually have the registered speakers all present.
Meeting.
It looks like she's just joined us.
Okay. Lovely. Thank you very much. If everybody is present, wonderful. Okay, so we will start off then with the first application, which is 223219 full at Vicarage Gardens, Broadmoor Lane, Oakhampton, and I will pass over to the planning officer. Thank you. Mr. Gibbons, when you are ready.
Good morning, members. Thank you, Chair. First application today is for a detached dwelling at Vicarage Gardens on Broadmoor Lane. The application is to replace the existing buildings on the site and construct a two-storey dwelling with car parking provided on the site and access via Broadmoor Lane. If I begin with the description of the site and where we are, the site is located on the western.
Sorry, Chair. Can I pause, please? I believe we have lost Councillor Crozier.
Okay, then we will just pause proceedings for a few minutes to enable him to get back online. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Crozier is back in the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Please do continue.
Yes, the site is located on the western side of Oakhampton, in a much more rural part of the settlement. The site is accessed from Broadmoor Lane, which is a single lane connected to Opcot Hill. Within the setting of the Grade 2 star listed Church of All Saints, which is located here on the map fairly centrally, which is also within a conservation area. The site is much more rural with undeveloped field patterns, and the application site actually forms part of a domestics, a small holding, which we will see in some photos in a little while. So moving forward, this is the application site, with the red line showing the development area, and the blue line showing the extent of the land and ownership. So the dwelling will be located fairly centrally within that plot, with access to the west. Moving on to the floor plans, I'm able to zoom in if anybody needs to take a closer look. These are the plans. It's a two-storey dwelling with 3 bedrooms and a ground floor living accommodation, which will be timber construction. These are the photos from the area. The buildings there in the foreground are the buildings that will be demolished. That's the small holding buildings I referred to earlier. In the background there, you can see that Grade 2 star listed church, which is also within a conservation area. And just in front of the church there is also the coach house, which is a Grade 2 listed building. From this photo, you can see that it is a much more rural area of Oakhampton. It maintains that countryside character, with trees and planting. This photo was probably taken in January period. This is a photo looking back towards the buildings where the site will be, the dwelling will be sited, and you can see the small holding laid out to horticulture. The photo here is understanding the context of the area more and its relationship with the surrounding area. Some close-up photos of the site, and this photo is taken from uphill, looking down Broadmoor Lane. So this would be access. The access you can see is not a tarmac road. It's a lane, and it does deteriorate as you head down that lane. So moving back to the proposal, I'll just briefly touch on the consultation responses. Highway authorities, no objections. That is subject to standing advice. The site is located in partly in a flood zone, so we did consult the Environment Agency, who raised no objections based on the siting of the dwelling. Environmental Health have recommended the use of an unsuspected contamination condition. The Town Parish Council support the development, and our drainage consultation resulted in some conditions that would be required to accommodate a drainage strategy. 4 letters of support were submitted, identifying the benefits in terms of removing existing buildings and the development to support local needs and also support employment. So turning to the principle of development, policy TTV1 of the Joint Local Plan identifies that Oakhampton is a main town where growth will be prioritised. The plan itself doesn't identify settlement boundaries, and in this case, because of the characteristics of the site, its relationship with the built form of Oakhampton and the more rural surrounding nature, it has got much more of a countryside character as opposed to the more urban form of Oakhampton. So for planning purposes, the site is considered to lie in the countryside because it's physically separated from Oakhampton and retains its undeveloped rural character. Policy TTV1/4 identifies that development in the countryside will only be permitted where it can be demonstrated to support the principles of sustainable communities identified in their policies SPT1 and SPT2, which I'll come on to in a bit more detail in a minute, as well as being permitted through policies TTV27 and or TTV26. Now TTV27 is to do with housing that can meet local needs and provides affordable housing, and what's also known as exception sites. This is a single dwelling and it cannot be considered to meet with that policy. TTV26 identifies that the local planning authority will protect the special characteristics and role of the countryside. The site is not isolated because it is in proximity to other buildings, and it's not distant from services to comply with the Braintree judgment on definition of isolated. The building will not reuse an existing building because the dwelling will be a new build dwelling, and therefore it won't be a replacement conversion, so it's not provided for within policy TTV26. So as a result, it is concluded that the development will not protect the special characteristics and role of the countryside, and therefore cannot be supported through policy TTV26. Furthermore, the site is also located in the setting of the Grade 2 star listed building, as well as the conservation area and the other Grade 2 listed structures known as Beach Court House and the listed Churchyard Cross. Policy TTV1, Policy DEV21 identifies that great weight should be given to the conservation of the plan's heritage assets. These are designated heritage assets, so they should hold more weight in the determination of planning applications. Where any harm to the significance of designation any harm to designated heritage assets must be fully justified against the public benefits of the development, and whether it's been demonstrated that all reasonable efforts have been made to sustain the existing use, find new uses or mitigate or the extent of the harm. Whilst the development of an individual dwelling in this location will not result in substantial harm, the public benefits of providing an individual dwelling, providing short-term construction employment, and a small increase in the housing stock are not considered to provide significant public benefits. Furthermore, allowing the development could put further pressure on sites to come forward on this more undeveloped edge of Oakhampton, which would then cumulatively impact on the landscape and the significance of those designated heritage assets. Furthermore, the proposal would not meet with the national policy framework that should recognises that the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside should be protected, as urban developments result in a built form which will undermine the rural character and appearance of the area and the edge of the settlement. The applicant has detailed this will be a self-build scheme, and it will help support local need. Policy DEV9 identifies self-build schemes will be supported provided they meet the overarching sustainable development policy objectives, as well as general amenity and design policies. In this instance, there is a conflict with these policies for the reasons I've already identified in terms of the impact on the countryside and conflicts with the heritage policies, namely DEV 21. So as a result, this development cannot be supported through the policy of the Joint Local Plan. Just turning to the individual design of the scheme, the design of the dwelling has been well thought out. It has been sited sensitively within the plot so that it can minimise the visual harm because it's been sited next to boundaries. And it will be a less visible part of the site. However, the dwelling will continue to undermine the rural character because of the built form and also the uses that go along with that, how the building's used. As a result, it was concluded that the development will cause harm to the character and appearance of the area and conflict with policies DEV 10 and DEV 21 of the development plan. Just briefly touching on the remaining material considerations, neighbourhood amenity would not be significantly adversely affected by this because of the location, and highways have reviewed the site and identified that there is access arrangement satisfactory for this development. However, the lane is in a poor state of repairs with large potholes, and it would be difficult for domestic vehicles to use it. As a result, this application is recommended for refusal for the following reasons. The proposed development would result in harm to the special characteristics of the countryside, and that would be contrary to TTV 26 of the Joint Local Plan, as well as Policy 170 of the MPPF. And the proposed development will also introduce an urban form of development that will be harmful to the character and appearance of the area and fails to conserve and enhance the historic environment, and that is contrary to Policies DEV 10, DEV 20 and DEV 21 of the Plymouth and South West Devon Joint Local Plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. Any members, do you have any questions at this point for Mr. Gibbons?
Chair, can I just butt in for a moment, just to clarify to Councillor Crozier that he didn't miss any of that presentation because we did adjourn the meeting immediately when he dropped out. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Councillor Cheadle has asked Mr. Gibbons if we can return to the map and be shown where other residential properties lie close to the proposed development. Councillor Cheadle, could you clarify your question, please? Is this the relevant part?
Yes, I just wanted to get back to the original map, which I now see back on my screen, to see whether the proposed development was close to other residential developments or was, you know, in a sense, out on its own.
And Mr. Gibbons is indicating with the mouse exactly where the development is. Okay, so can you see that clearly?
I can, but it's so small I can't see. But are there any other houses sort of near where that house is proposed to be built?
There's a to the north there, on the north side of Broadmoor Lane, where it intersects with the junction down to the site. There are a number of dwellings. I don't know exactly, but I'd probably say two dwellings. My understanding is they're more rural, agricultural based dwellings, as opposed to open market dwellings. But I can't be sure of that because I can't exactly remember from my site visit.
Okay.
I do know the area actually, so I can that there are two properties directly across the lane. If you put your mouse back, obviously where I'm waving my mouse, nobody can see. Yes, there's one, and there's one to the left of that as well.
So within sort of how many meters from where this proposed site would be?
That's probably about 200 to 300 meters, I would suggest.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Renders, Councillor Hipsey and Councillor Pearce waiting to come in. Councillor Renders.
Okay, thank you. Just a quick couple. One, you put emphasis on the road or the lane. My question is, who would own the lane and would it become adopted?
Yes, the lane is already part of the local highway network, but it's so it's not a private road. It's a lane. It is in a particularly poor state of repair. It's potholed and it's not maintained to a standard as you would find in a more urban part of Oakhampton, where you've got tarmac roads and pavements.
Okay, and my second question was, although it's not going on an existing building, are there other buildings? Were there other buildings actually on the site? I noted a couple on there. I'm just thinking one of the characteristics was the view across being detrimental, and at the minute, looking at it, I don't think it's any worse than it currently is. But is that the only one we've got on there? I mean,
yeah, the building there is obviously a lean-to, low impact, single story development that's got no lighting in it, no first floor. Mm-hmm. That building, sort of, you look at the level of it there within that photo, is very much wouldn't stand out within the landscape because of its scale and its size. The dwelling, by comparison, is 2 stories in height with windows and light will overspill, and also you've got to bear in mind that the domestic paraphernalia that will be associated with that use will be much more significant than solely a storage building used for perhaps the potting shed or perhaps storage of materials associated with the horticulture.
And was there anything else on the site? There was another building as well. Is that going to remain, or is that due to be demolished?
That's not part of this application site.
Okay.
The red line boundary just goes around the that timber building that we saw in the previous photograph.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor Hipsey, please.
Yes, I have a question about sustainability, please, particularly SPT2 brackets, paragraph 6. Can you tell us a little bit, please, Mr. Gibbons, about the public transport provision? And I'm assuming that perhaps walking and cycling access would be via the lane. Can you give us some details about that, please?
Yeah, no problem at all. I did reference that earlier in the presentation, but I didn't come around to those points. Yes, policy SPT1 and SPT2 are the broad level sustainability policies within the joint local plan, and they're a set of broad considerations to allow us to consider how the proposal complies with the sustainability objectives of the plan. Now, in these rural locations, we've got a set of criteria that we begin to look at, and one of them is does it provide reasonable access to a vibrant mixed-use centre, and that's in policy SPT2-1, and that really gives us an indication of whether you could walk and cycle and use alternative means of transport than the car to access services. I mean, in this instance, it is within 400 metres of the edge of the settlement. So in terms of the sustainability, it does provide some sustainability because of its proximity to Oakhampton. It's a similar set of circumstances to a scheme that was considered at land north of Buddle Close, where that scheme again was on the edge of Tavistock, and it did have more of the characteristics of the countryside, but because of its proximity, it did have a reasonable access to a mixed-use centre. So in this instance, because of its location, it does give you those benefits, but you've also got to bear in mind that there isn't much planned infrastructure in this locality, whereas on the eastern side of Oakhampton there is much more planned development. There's house building development going ahead with associated infrastructure such as the school going in to support that. In this location there isn't that commitment, and it's got a much more rural countryside character.
Thanks. So TTV1 brackets 4 is not being considered as a reason for objection.
TTV14. Sorry, sorry, can you repeat that question?
Well, sustainability is not is not an issue. It's not being considered an issue that is being used to turn this application down.
No, not with this one, because if you recall, those sets of criteria were part of the reasons that the land north of Buddle Close was refused on. We refused it on its poor access to a vibrant mixed-use centre. However, when the inspector looked at that decision, they concluded that it did have a reasonable access because it was within that 400 metres, and this is a similar set of circumstances. So in this instance, we feel that we cannot support a refusal based on sustainability.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gibbons.
Thank you. I have Councillor Pearce, Councillor Crozier and Councillor Moyes waiting to come in. So Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got concerns about the lane. I mean, I'm not familiar with this particular part. I've been up to Oakhampton Church, but I haven't driven beyond that. Is this lane that's shown, which is untarmacked, is that definitely maintained from the public purse by Devon Highways? And is it a through route to another area, or does it just serve the small holding?
Yes, I mean, this is the photograph of the access. You can see in the foreground of the photo, you've got the tarmac, which is uphill. I think they call that road, and then the quality of that servicing deteriorates quite quickly as you get down that route. You can see there's sort of grass growing in the middle, and as you get further down, it does begin to get a poor quality. Whether it's I think it probably does form part of. I mean, I'm not a highways expert, but my understanding is that it would form part of the local highway network. However, there would be a prioritisation of roads that would be maintained, because obviously I think Devon's got one of the largest road networks within the country, and the County Council's local highway authority would have to prioritise investment to areas where you can get the most benefit, whereas this development certainly only serves those two houses down at Broadmoor Lane. I think it might connect further on, but I've got to admit, on my site visit I didn't go quite that much further, and I don't know if we've got the highways officer here today to be able to provide any more information.
I don't believe we do have anybody from highways here today. Mr. Weimer?
No, we don't, Chair.
No. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Right. Councillor Crozier, has your question been answered? Ms. Young, is Councillor Crozier still here, or has he lost connection again?
He is. I've just unmuted him.
Sorry, Chairman.
Thank you.
My point is that I think the answer's been, question's been answered, but potholes can be repaired. I live in a similar situation, and we actually made the road up, and Devon County Council are actually repairing it now.
Thank you. Councillor Moyes.
Yes. How large is the plot, and how much time has it been a small holding? And have we had a previous application on this site before?
If I go back to the plans here, you can see the site plan. I haven't actually measured it, but you probably with the you probably can't see that, but if I zoom in, if I might be able to zoom in here, you can see on the on that plan there, you've got a distance of 16 metres from the boundary to the middle, to the edge of the dwelling. So you're probably looking at the region of 20 metres in size, in width. It's fairly square.
Sorry, no, I mean the whole plot.
The whole plot. Well, the whole plot. I haven't got that information, I'm afraid. But the red line boundary is the site area. So that's probably roughly 20 square metres. 20 meters by 20 meters. In terms of the length of the use, we haven't got any planning records to identify that. I don't know. I mean, that building there looks to be fairly there for a fair amount of time, based on the quality of the roofing material and the deterioration of it. So I wouldn't want to guess, but I would say that it's been there for a substantial period of time.
We do have the agent with it. We do have the
application on it some time ago.
I'm unaware of that. I haven't seen that. There's no relevant planning history that I was able to identify.
Okay, thank you.
I was just going to say, in design and access statement, there is reference made to that this piece of land has been used by this particular family for at least 2, possibly 3 generations. Planning agent is registered to speak, so that might be a question that he might be able to help with, the length of time there's been buildings on the site.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Mott, did you wish to ask a question? No? Yes, Councillor Mott, sorry.
Apologies, Chair. I was getting the mouse on the correct screen. No, it was just really to confirm for members that Broadmoor Lane is an access only to the site, the other properties there, and fields beyond. There is no through road to join up with any other road.
Thank you. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yes, my question is the use of the blue lined area of the site as shown on the site plan. Will that continue to be used as a small holding, or what is the proposed use of that area? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The application site is just the red line boundary. I haven't got any further information on the remaining use of it. Because it's not part of the application site, they could continue to use it as it is currently laid out, as identified within those photos.
Chair, can I add to that it was really the use of that? Is that area existing for agricultural use in one form or another? And as I say, will it continue to be used? I'm trying to get a feel of what the remainder of this land will be used and will look like. Thank you, Chair.
I would say it's a small holding, as in small scale cultivation for. I don't think you could demonstrate that has got an agricultural use, because it's more of a small scale holding, probably for personal consumption, I would imagine, perhaps some small market garden selling to a local supplier, but I wouldn't say that's an agricultural use, given the scale of it.
And we can only consider this on the application that we have before us, rather than the broader area.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody to the planning officer for the moment? Nope. Okay, lovely. Thank you. In that case, I will now move to our registered speakers, and the first one is Councillor Goffey from Oakhampton Town Council. Councillor Goffey, can you confirm? Can you hear me?
I can indeed.
You can indeed, lovely. Just like to say that you have 3 minutes to which you can make your presentation, and afterwards members can ask you some questions for clarity. Ms Young will give you a 30-second warning when you've got about 30 seconds left, okay, just to help you with your timing. When you're ready, in your own time.
Chair, sorry, it's actually the agent first. I don't know if we can get the agent in.
Is it? My apologies. I've got it the wrong order then on my list.
Thank you.
Oh, I do apologise.
Up to speak.
I'm sorry, Councillor Goffey. Yes, stand down. Mr. Constant, can you confirm if you can hear me, please?
Good morning.
Good morning to you. I apologise. I had it the wrong way around. I just wanted to be sure that you could hear me properly, and you probably heard what I was saying to Councillor Goffey. It is the same for you, as you're probably aware, that you have 3 minutes in which you can make a presentation. Members can ask you questions afterwards if they wish to for clarification, and Ms Young will give you just a 30-second heads up when you're getting to the end of your time, all right, to enable you to wrap up. Okay? So in your own time, when you're ready, please do feel free to make a start. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we are grateful for the opportunity to present why we believe this application should be approved. In particular, we're grateful for the support shown by Okehampton Town Council and Councillor Leach and Councillor Davies in calling this case in. Any site where you're able to wander around the site, in our opinion, would dispel the key reasons being cited for recommending refusal of this self-build application. The site of the proposed single dwelling sits well down low in a hollow, largely set out of view, they're intermixed with the wider existing smallholding activities taking place at the site. As the report states, the unit has been placed sensitively within the site context, close to the natural boundaries, and removes two unsightly, poor condition agricultural buildings. This being in favour of providing a local young man with an affordable route to home ownership in Okehampton, where he has lived his whole life. Our client, Paul Newbury, would particularly like me to stress how passionate he is about Okehampton and his energy and enthusiasm for smallholding at the site, along with his ardent wish to build his own home there. This site has been in his family ownership 3 generations, since 1955. Paul's plans help to safeguard its cultivation as a smallholding site for the generations to come, just as it was in earlier times when it was in use as productive land for the not so far away vicarage. We reject the assertion that this application, if approved, would prompt an escalation in the development of the nearby area on the west side of the town, as the site in question must surely be in a minority of one. This being when its position, set down low in a discrete hollow, combined with tree boundary and removal of near derelict agricultural buildings are taken into account. With this in mind, the net gain of helping local constituents with their housing needs, combined with the net enhancement of the precise location, makes for a positive argument for approval. Equally, a single unit, cut down low in the landscape, comprising of natural slate, natural cedar and stone, is difficult to claim as an urban infringement of the countryside, especially when there are 2 nearby properties in the form of Barnabas House and Old Vicarage Farm. They aren't shown on the photos offered earlier by the planning officer, which I would just observe they would also have lights of an evening time and domestic paraphernalia in the course of their existence. We're more than happy that the final building materials are managed by condition. And regarding size, we are only talking about a 6.93 metres by 9.13 metres deep property. Alongside this point, I would just note there's been no objections from near neighbours, including the church, and the assertion we feel that a single dwelling would make a measurable impact on the church heritage asset is also dispelled by both the low set position of the dwelling and a lack of comparable sites in the vicinity to create any sort of precedent. The new dwelling will not be easily associated with the church nor vicarage building due to its position. More minor points regarding drainage, flood risk, ecological mitigation and highways have all been covered by reports from the relevant professionals.
3 minutes, please can you wrap up?
Indeed, it would be reasonable to assume that Paul would be suitably diligent as a practicing smallholder. With these points borne in mind, we find it really hard to believe the proposal is harmful in any way to the character and appearance of the vicinity. In fact, quite effects on the poor condition structures.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. I need to ask you to wrap up on your last sentence. Thank you very much indeed. Members, do you have Councillor Vachon?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Constant, is this property to be used for what would be termed a rural worker? Are they using this property to live in, to work on the land adjacent to this property?
The intention is to continue smallholding at the site as per Paul's grandfather, his father and now himself. The main activity is the servicing of the land. There might be small-scale supply of produce, though as a statement of fact, Paul does have obviously have a job and occupation. Whether that changed over time, obviously that would be down to the Newbury family and how they plan out their finances. In character, just to say that the site would remain as it has been for many generations as a small holding setting, and the area around the proposed property would be more small holding in character rather than changing especially into sort of a domestic garden. Paul's hobby really is small holding, and his need for a home and combining the two with the land that the family owns is a logical proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Constant? Okay. In that case, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Constant. Okay, if I could ask you to mute if possible, if you can do that. Thank you. Okay, Councillor Coffey. It is now your turn. I won't repeat what I've already just said, as I think you probably remember it. So when you're ready, in your own time, please do make a start. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, if I may, I'd quickly like to answer a couple of questions that were raised earlier by members. This lane is the next turning after Vicarage Road, which has dwellings on both sides of it. There are already 2 bungalows down that lane, and the existing primary school is in Glendale Road opposite Broadmoor Lane, which is a large estate in existence. So it's not quite as rural as perhaps is being made out. Right, I'll get back to my speech. Like Councillor Leach, I feel that due to the fact that the application is for 1 dwelling on private land that is self-built, makes it fit well with West Devon's current policies. The dwelling is for the landowner to live in, and by self-build makes it affordable, whereas purchasing a new house within the area would not. Although the report states initially, the report states that it is a flood zone, the Environment Agency has now agreed that there's no risk of flooding. The report also shows that it's a cul-de-sac, and we believed it to be unadopted. Plus, the Highways Department have no issues with the proposed development. The land already has old buildings on it. A new property would actually enhance the area and not be detrimental to the rurality. The proposed development is in easy access to the town centre. It's about a 5-minute walk, if that. And developments to the west of the town have to be more sustainable than the large developments that are over a mile to the east of the town centre and were built on farmland. The design of the property is seen as an issue, but external facings can be chosen to blend in better with the surroundings. The Environment Agency has no objection. The flood risk assessment commented, as the site is located near to a tributary of the River Ockman, the groundwater level beneath the site is likely to be largely controlled by this watercourse, which would act as a sump to drain water in the ground away from the site. As the existing landowner, I would have thought he would know whether or not the site was liable to flood. Ecological assessment allows for mitigation procedures for native fauna and arboreal replacement if necessary. I would suggest that a new water connection to mains water be strongly recommended. I can see no reason to object to this property, hidden from view by the contours of the land and a single dwelling by the existing land owner. I think I'm within my 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Goffey. If you just sit tight, and then for members if they wish to ask questions. And I do have one from Councillor Hipsey.
Yes, Chair. I think that's you, Councillor Yelland. You have a question before me?
No, I just put that as a heading, so we knew exactly where I was on the agenda.
just a point of clarity, please, for Councillor Goffey. You mentioned the primary school complex. Are they the buildings to the south-southeast of the development site?
Oh gosh, it's on the other side of the Hatherley Road. This lane comes off the Hatherley Road, and on the other side of the road is the estate within which, next to the rugby club, is the primary school, which was built in 1992, I think.
Yes, I can see that. Thanks. So there are some buildings quite close to the south of the site. I just wondered what that was. It looks probably like a farm. I'm not sure. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, just for clarification, it does say Oakhampton Primary School on the map temporarily closed. It is an open, fully functioning school. I suspect that temporary close may have been a COVID.
COVID, yeah.
Yes, because it says about the cinema being closed as well. So it is a fully functioning school. Councillor Cheadle. Question from Councillor Coffey.
Just interested to know whether there were any sites in and around Oakhampton that had been earmarked for self-build projects. This, I believe, is a self-build proposal, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
this is indeed a self-build proposal, yes, and we would welcome applicants for self-build. There are a few pockets of land within the town that we would love to see developed, which are more brownfield sites than this is. This is an agricultural site with extremely dilapidated agricultural buildings upon it, which means that we would really like to see it developed properly.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Councillor Goffey? No? Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Goffey, for your input. And as I say, you're welcome to stay until the end of the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now to the ward member, which is Councillor Leach. And I know he's present because I saw him earlier. And Councillor Leach, you as a ward member have 5 minutes in which to make your presentation. So feel free to start when you are ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The last two speakers have probably covered most of what I was going to say, but and also my reasons for calling it in are on the report. But having looked at the report, it seems that the only real reason for the planning officer to recommend refusal of this application is due to it being close to a heritage asset and in the countryside. Policy DEV 21 states that development should not cause any harm to any historic asset. And with my background in national built heritage, I would certainly agree with that. And the church is certainly an asset. But within the report, it does say that the development would not cause any substantial harm. The proposed development is in the open countryside, but is adjacent to other properties. And I certainly don't think that the presentation showed that enough. We should have had photographs showing those properties, which are directly opposite the access into that site. And until quite recently, the first property at the end of the access to the site had 2 young lads in it. It's very domestic and has been, and that track as it is, has been used for domestic use for, well, as long as I've been in Oakhampton. I don't think the proposed development, as I say, is in the open countryside, but is adjacent to other properties and is hardly going to contribute much to the cumulative effect of the area. West Devon has a self-build policy, Dev 9, and to date, we've not had one self-build property built within the Oakhampton area. And this is probably down to how much the land prices have risen over the years. This proposed development is on land owned by the family who needs a home. Another reason put forward for refusing this application was that under NPPF it would damage the intrinsic character and beauty of the countryside. I have to say I find this somewhat ironic, especially when we look to the east of Oakhampton, where the developments that have already been built have completely obliterated the intrinsic beauty of the countryside of this part of Devon. So I can't see that this one property, if conditions are put on this proposed application, should do any harm at all. Other concerns have been the track from the main road. This is used regularly by the owners now, plus the other residents close by. So I don't think it'll mean there'll be any more vehicular movements if this property is built. I did note that water supply had been mentioned in one letter, but I believe that this is not a material planning condition and would need to be addressed outside this application. Drainage was seen as an issue, but again, that's been resolved by a planning condition. I just note that unless I've missed something, I haven't seen anything from our historic specialist. I've not seen any reports or any comments. That's just a question for later, maybe. I think that along with the drainage condition, all other issues can be mitigated by having an agreement on what type of materials, which has already been discussed, are used in the construction, a landscaping condition maybe to include a few more trees, and one to stop any future development at all on this plot of land. I would therefore ask the committee to look favourably on this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leach. I do have a question for you. That is Councillor Moyes.
Yes, both yourself, Councillor Leach, excuse me, and Councillor Coffey mentioned that this would be affordable. The officers said it wouldn't. Could I have your reasons for thinking it's affordable? Excuse me.
Mainly because the price of land in and around Oakhampton has flown up since the developments around Oakhampton have come our way. This land is, and the biggest cost to actually building a self-built property is buying the plot of land. So as they own this and they can self-build, it is affordable, far more affordable than buying one of these spec houses built by the national developers.
Thank you, Councillor Leach. Okay, Councillor Cheadle has a question for the planning officer, so we'll come to that in just a second. And the planning officer has also just put up a photograph which shows a little bit closer where you could see the other two properties across the lane. So if there are no more questions for Councillor Leach, thank you very much indeed, Councillor, for your time. Just a couple of questions, if I may, for Mr. Gibbons myself. I was just having a quick look through the report because I did think there was something in here about the conservation officer, but I can't seem to find it. Are you able to advise, please, as to whether the conservation officer did have opportunity to have input into this? Mr. Gibbons, are you there?
Sorry about that. Yes, on this scale of application, we don't ask for a formal comment from the conservation officer. We have an informal chat with him and discuss it. So I discussed it with him, and he was concerned about the impact on the setting and the relationship with the designated heritage assets, because within that area on that photo you can see there's other small holdings as well. So individually there's less substantial harm. If this does come further, this development comes further forward as an individual dwelling, there are cumulatively there would be much more of a concern. But there wasn't a formal comment on the file from the conservation officer, just an informal chat.
Okay, and just another question, just picking up on something that has featured actually in quite a lot of the material that was being written and submitted, that the agent has referred to, and it has been referred to in other places, about the importance of this is a local family seeking to have somewhere to live locally. Would it be reasonable, if this was to be approved today, would it be reasonable to put on a condition that it should be retained in local ownership?
We do within the emerging SPD, which does identify that we can seek to use what's known as a local connection clause, which seeks to ensure that the dwelling would be maintained in ownership to meet the local housing need within the joint local plan area, but that would need to be secured through a Section 106 legal agreement.
Okay, and I can see Mr. Weimer's waiting to come in, but just before I do, Mr. Weimer, I just wanted to clarify. So that would be about a local connection clause.
Clause, that's right.
Yes, but that would mean that from understanding of that a property could be sold on not necessarily locally, as long as it was occupied locally. Would that be correct?
It would need to, so it would have to understand that it can be sold to somebody outside of the joint local plan area, but perhaps Phil Baker, our local plan officer, might be able to provide more clarity on the actual occupation of that.
Okay, I'm not suggesting for a minute that the applicant is thinking of doing that. I'm just trying to clarify. Perhaps Mr. Weimer can come in and help on that.
Chair, thank you. I was just going to suggest, as the same as Mr. Gibbons just has, that perhaps this would be an appropriate time to ask Mr. Baker to make some comments on the policy position and the question of occupancy conditions, clauses, and potentially affordability.
Thank you. Mr. Baker.
Thank you, councillors. The points raised are both very valid and very pertinent to the consideration of this application. Mr. Gibbons has given you a very good overview of the site and the context within the site and how it relates to the edge of settlement. As you all will know, we have a statutory obligation to make decisions in accordance with our adopted development plan, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So for clarity, the personal circumstances of the applicant are not a material consideration in the determination of permanent land use change, although clearly that might stimulate particular conditions or recommendations that we seek to apply to a permission that recognises that there is a pre-existing local connection from the applicant to the local area. As it stands before us at the moment, without any conditions or proposals from the applicants to restrict the dwelling in such a way, it's not considered to be meeting a demonstrable local need because it could be sold or occupied by anybody from anywhere. Nor is it an affordable dwelling in planning terms, so it wouldn't meet an NPPF definition of an affordable home. It doesn't fit with the adopted spatial strategy either, in as much as the site is clearly detached and distinct from the edge of settlement. It doesn't relate well to the edge of Oakhampton, notwithstanding the distances from local facilities and the edge of settlement. But as the photographs have demonstrated, it is a site much more rural in character, and as such doesn't accord with the more densely built urban form of Oakhampton itself. Self-build has been made reference to as well, and clearly there is policy support in Dev 9 for the delivery of more self-build accommodation. However, that doesn't override all of the other policy requirements of the plan, and nor does it override the need for us to deliver a sustainable pattern of development. And I would suggest to you members that ad hoc and piecemeal single dwellings are beyond the edge of settlements in locations such as this don't represent a sustainable pattern of development. Whether or not Mr. Weimer or members wish to revisit the possible mechanisms by which we could secure a local connection or local occupancy eligibility test to the dwelling, I don't know, because that isn't part of the application before us. But yeah, for clarity, I'm entirely in accordance with the recommendation from the officer, in as much as it doesn't accord with the adopted spatial strategy of the plan.
Thank you, Mr. Baker. I have two people waiting to come in for questions. I have Councillor Cheadle and Councillor Crozier. Councillor Cheadle, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. My question was simply prompted by a comment from the ward member who's suggested a condition might be appropriate that no further development would occur on the site. And my question is simply, is it possible to put such a condition on were we minded to approve this?
Is this one from Mr. Weimer?
I'll answer that, Chair, if you'd like. In my view, a planning condition could only relate to, in terms of restricting permitted development or restricting further development, could only relate to the red line. And I don't believe you can impose a condition to say you will not build anything else outside of that red line, because the condition can only relate to the actual site area.
Thank you. That was my understanding. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crozier.
Thank you, Chairman. I wish we'd had this photograph earlier, this aerial photograph, because it shows some quite mature trees surrounding this site, which would help blend it in or disappear it from the scene. That's my only point I wish to make. And I've listened to everybody else very closely. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members, any other questions? If not, then I will move the recommendation as laid out on page 4 of your agenda, which is a recommendation for refusal. This does not indicate position of voting, it just simply enables us to move into debate. Councillor Pearce, are you happy to second that proposal?
Yes, I am, Chairman, happy to second.
Thank you very much. Members, we are now in debate. If anybody wishes to speak, please could you indicate in the chat box. All gone remarkably quiet. I'll give a couple of minutes because I am aware that when you're trying to think what you have to say and make a note of it can take a few seconds. Okay, in the absence of anybody, I'll put my video camera on a second. There we go. In the absence of anybody wishing to speak, in that case, we will take it to the vote. And what will happen is Mrs. Hall will do a roll call again, and she will actually seek confirmation that you were actually present for the entire item and take your vote as to whether it's for, against, or abstain. So we are voting on the recommendation, which is to refuse, beg pardon, the recommendation to refuse the application. So Mrs. Hall, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me, members, I will ask you in turn to confirm you were present and have heard all of the debate. Councillor Cheadle.
Yes, I can confirm I heard all of the debate.
And can I have your vote, please?
And my vote is in support of the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Crozier.
It's all right, get my mouse in the right place. Yes, I can confirm I heard the whole debate and I vote against.
Thank you. Councillor Hipsey.
I can confirm that I heard the whole debate and my vote is against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Mott.
Thank you. I can confirm that I was present for the whole of the presentation and I support the officer recommendation for refusal.
Thank you. Councillor Moyes.
Yes, I heard the whole debate and I support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you. I can confirm that I heard the whole debate and I support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Ratcliffe.
I also confirm that I was present during the duration of the debate and I support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Renders.
Yes, I can confirm that I was there for the whole debate and I'm going to go against in this instance.
Thank you. Councillor Vachon.
Yes, I can confirm I heard all the presentation. I am against the motion.
Thank you. And Councillor Yelland.
I confirm that I heard all of the debate and I am for the motion.
Thank you. That's 6 in support of the recommendation and 4 against.
So I therefore confirm that application has been refused. Thank you very much indeed for your time on this particular application. Our next one is actually not due to start until 11:15, and I need to give Mr. Young a chance to bring in the speakers for the next application. So if I could ask everybody to go to mute, please, and keep your videos off. will continue, and to say thank you to Mr. Constant for his time. Ms. Goffey, Councillor Goffey, of course, will remain because she is speaking at the next application. Thank you. And we will talk again in about 5 minutes. Okay, according to my calculations, it is 11:15. Ms Young, are you able to confirm if all registered speakers are present for this application?
I have just called in the speaker.
Hello?
Yes, he's there now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So just to ensure that everybody is present and as they should be, Ms Hall will now take the roll call again to confirm presence. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Cheadle. Councillor Cheadle. Councillor Crozier.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Hipsey. Councillor Hipsey.
Sorry, it's Councillor Cheadle here. I just missed my call, but I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Councillor Hipsey.
Present and correct.
Councillor Mott.
Present, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moyes.
Present.
Councillor Pearce.
Present.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Present.
Councillor Renders.
Present.
Councillor Vachon.
Present.
And Councillor Yelland.
Present.
Thank you. And just for clarification for those listening to this application, the officers in this meeting are Mr Fairburn, the Borough Solicitor, Mr Weimer, Head of Development Management, Mr Gibbons, the Case Officer, Ms Young, the Gatekeeper, and myself, Mrs Hall, Democratic Services Officer. Thank you.
And Mr Baker from Joint
Mr Baker,
thank you. Just checking he was still present, can't see the list. Lovely. So now we move on to application number 3417, that's /19 full, which is at 129 Station Road, Oakhampton, Devon. And the planning officer is Mr Gibbons, who in fact has all the cases this morning, so is doing very well. Over to you, Mr Gibbons. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Next application for today is 129 Station Road in Oakhampton. This is a retrospective application for the retention of a unit of holiday accommodation, which is taken the form of a beehive. So it's a little bit more unusual. Looking at the site is located in Oakhampton, to the north of the train station, as the site drops down towards Simmons Park, the main recreational ground within Oakhampton. The site forms part of the curtilage of 129 Station Road, which has had some quite extensive planning history to it in terms of the uses on the site. The application site is not within the conservation area. So the proposal is for the retention of the timber-built holiday cabin, which has been built into the side of the slope and accessed via 129 Station Road. And there's a bridge that sort of links it to it, which we'll see together in the photos. So if I just bring up the site here, to the south there, you can see the station and the platform. Around where my mouse here that's 129 Station Road, and the application site boundary goes around that red line there. There are a total of 10 parking spaces that have been provided, and the site is accessed along this track here to the south of the dwellings. So to look at the consultation responses, the Highway Authority have advised of no highway implication. The Town Council have objected to the proposal based on visual impact, ecology and landscape heritage of the site, and the planning history, and the cumulative impact of holiday accommodation on this location. The tree officer has also reviewed the site and has no objection, nor has the landscape officer. The council's landscape officer has also reviewed the proposal and has no objection to the scheme. And the drainage consultee has advised that we'll need some further details. However, they were subsequently submitted and agreed. So 3 letters of representation identifying retrospective nature of the application, concerns about guests getting lost, drainage, impact on trees, impact on heritage, parking, noise and disturbance, and visual impact. And notably, there is a planning history there for a retention of a yurt within the building, and changes of the ancillary buildings to holiday accommodation, decking and associated works. That application was allowed on appeal. So to begin with, if I just begin with and show you some photos, and then I'll come back to the policy considerations. So here's the aerial photograph from Google. You can see how extensively wooded it is, and you'll see that, and then some later photos from Simmons Park. But you've got this is 129 Station Road, and then you've got as a yurt that's previously consented within there, and there is also some other uses within the building. Also in the photographs, there's a building that's under construction that I'll come to. So this is the site plan submitted. You can see there you've got, I'll zoom in here, you've got the Humble Bumble, I think that's how it's known as, and then there's the Bird Box, which is a unit of holiday accommodation, I understand, an ancillary building there, and then you've got the yurts there, which was previously allowed at appeal, and then the parking arrangements are here. So you've got a forecourt here, which is the main parking area, as well as some parking to the south along the top there. This is actually at a higher level than the site because the site drops down, but we'll see that from the photos in a minute. So these are the elevations. As I said, it is a fairly unusual development proposal. I think they're trying to focus on the the quirkiness as a holiday offer to attract people there, and the use of facilities and within Oakhampton. So you've got the timber built construction. You can see the side profile there, how it's been assimilated into the landscape through construction and raising up within the developments. And there, these are the side profiles and some visuals. Inside, you can see that there's 3 levels to the building: a bedroom, sitting area, and dining area within that. So it's geared up for holiday accommodation. This is the photo looking into the forecourt. I'm standing here with my back towards the area of holiday accommodation where the yurt is behind me, so there's some parking there. That's the 129 Station Road, which is the host dwelling. This is a photo from the coach house looking back towards the site. There is a live enforcement case on the site at the moment. I have spoken to the enforcement officer, so I can provide some more information on that. This is looking back down from station towards station 129 Station Road from the bridle path, which is to the I think that's, sorry if I just go back, that's standing here to the east of the site, looking back down towards the area, so around this area here. This is the view looking into the site. These views are from, there's a public footpath that actually takes you up from Simmons Park towards the youth hostel, which is nearby and connects to the train station, just to illustrate the woodedness. I know this is in the summer, but to show you how wooded it is. This is a photo of the parking area, building there in the background. You can see this is more in the winter, so the trees aren't as in leaf as they are in the summer. Again, this is a photo taken in January time, which is probably quite a good time because of the fact that it's not in leaf, the trees aren't in leaf. So that's the building there. You can see it's retrospective. You can see it has begun to assimilate itself into the landscape through greening of the roof. The tree officer, as I said, has no objections to this proposal, and neither has the landscape officer. This is a photo further down, just showing the ridgeline there of the trees. A side profile photo. And then these are some photos of the application site from the car park. These have been provided by the applicant. So in the summer from Simmons Park, you know, the site's so well screened you can't see that area from anywhere in the summer, and in the winter it will be more visible, but it has begun to assimilate itself into the landscape. A more distant photograph there in June 2020, and here we go. This is the more more recent photos. Sorry, the photos from January, which we begin to show it in its context. So that's photos of the area. If I go back to the site plan here, and I'll outline some of the policy considerations. So the site is located within Oakhampton, which is a main town identified within policy TTV 21. So within the main town, we would prioritise a broad range of services to support the wider area. Holiday accommodation and tourist accommodation would be a part of that mix of town uses you'd find in the main town. It would help support tourism businesses as well as the economy in a wider area because of visitor spend. You know, people would spend their money within the local shops and facilities as well as using tourism facilities. The site is connected well to the cycle path there, which connects down to Lidford. You've also got the relationship with the railway line, which does provide a summer service, as I understand, and the site has got some good proximity to the town centre and the good facilities within Simmons Park there. So it would provide a unit of holiday accommodation, which we would seek to condition so it can't be used as permanent residential accommodation. And as a result, we considered that the scheme had good connectivity to foot and cycle paths and a train station, although there is a limited service, and the principle would be supported. Now, the principle supported, that does not mean that we have to accept the development in terms of if it had an unacceptable impact on amenity or had an unacceptable impact on the character and appearance of the area. In terms of design, it has been built into the landscape. The timber form softens the form of development, and it begins to assimilate itself into the landscape. The tree officers reviewed it. Obviously, there's a lot of trees within that valley, and has no concerns about that, and raised no objection. Likewise, the landscape officers reviewed it and understood the context, particularly from Simmons Park, and has raised no objections to the impact of the development on the landscape. So, as a result, it was considered that the development is compatible with the character and appearance of the area. Moving forward and looking at amenity, this is a concern that some of the residents have identified, as well as I think the parish, the town council identified the cumulative impact of the development site. And as I said, there is a live enforcement case on the site. The site is fairly extensive. There is a fair amount of land there associated with the use of 129 Station Road, but at the same time there has also been a fair amount of developments, because from that site plan you can see you've got the bird box there to the east of the beehive, you've got the yurt, you've got the ancillary building. There's also, I understand, holiday uses associated in 129 Station Road, and the house itself. So if you begin to look at the development, the context and the nature of the development, it does begin to increase the numbers of people on that site. They have provided 10 parking spaces, and that accords with the standard within the SPD. We have looked carefully at these issues around amenity, and we consider that subject to conditions, we can mitigate the impact of the development. We're looking to ensure that there's a management plan to ensure that if there is any concerns regarding noise and disturbance, these residents will know how to raise those concerns with the applicant. It's understood the applicant lives on site at 129 Station Road, so there is oversight of the development of the site, and I think it's in the interest of the applicant to ensure that the nature of the occupation is undertaken in a more considered manner to ensure that there isn't noise and disturbance. I don't think the scale of development and the nature of the occupancies for a form which could give noise and disturbance. We have also looked at requiring some signage to be placed on the site so that resident visitors to the site can be aware of where to go, because I think there has been some concerns previously about people stopping and asking for directions. So we have carefully looked at the amenity issues and consider that subject to conditions, the development could be accommodated without giving rise to a significant loss of amenity or noise and disturbance. Having said that, there is beginning to be a large amount of development on the site, and I think it's a balance. But if there was significantly more, I think we'd have to look at those concerns in more detail if future development came forward. So, looking at the remaining issues, the foul drainage was being dealt with via pumping system, which pumps water to the surface. The drainage officer supports this approach, but has requested some more technical details subject to a condition. So the recommendation is to approve this application subject to conditions to ensure that it's restricted to holiday use, details of signage to mitigate the impacts, a management plan so that we're sure of how to raise concerns if there are amenity concerns, noise and disturbance, and there's an accountable line there so that people can get in touch with the applicants, and there's a process to deal with complaints, and a drainage condition. So to conclude, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We have some questions coming in just a moment. I did want to clarify, though, for members and also any members of the public who might be watching as well, that the board member did request a site visit for this particular application. Due to the COVID-19 restrictions, it isn't possible for committee members to actually make site visits at the moment. And so obviously we haven't as a committee made any visits to site on this particular application. I have Councillor Moyes, Councillor Vachon and Councillor Cheadle waiting to come in. Councillor Moyes.
Yeah, can I just clarify or confirm a couple of points, because I don't know the area at all. 129, that is attached to another dwelling, presumably, firstly.
Yes, if I just go through the, if I zoom in here, I should be able to show you.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's 129, the dwelling there, and then this is the curtilage of this site extends to include these buildings.
Okay, and the other thing is, the report says 4 sites. Presumably, this application is the fourth site. It's not a beehive with 4 different bits in it for 4 different families.
No, it's not. No, it's a single unit of holiday accommodation.
Fine, thank you.
Councillor Vachon.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Gibbons, I noticed from some of the photographs, the Google mapping, that we seem to got the buildings transposed somewhat. I think yes, that one, the bird box, it seems to have been transposed with the humblebee. Am I correct in that? And in which case the photographs looking up from the park during the winter, are those the same buildings? Because one was very prominent and one you couldn't see the other one behind the trees. I'm just wondering if we got those the wrong way round.
Yes, I think that's a good point. I think we've taken this image from Google Maps, and I don't know how the system works, but you physically can't see the buildings, can you, because of the canopies of the trees. I think the best that's for context really. The best plan would be to understand the context here with the buildings here. So that's the red line boundaries, the bumblebee, and then the bird box, I think it's called, is to the east of that, and then the ancillary building there is to the west. So if I then take you through to the photos. This photo here has been submitted by the applicant, and I think they're identifying there's a neighbouring building which would be the west, I think, because this is looking. This is a photo a bit better because obviously it's the photo without the tree cover. So that building there to the left, the right-hand side, sorry, in pink, is a neighbouring building. The photo here is with the red photo, with the red line, sorry, is showing roughly where the other photo would be, the beehive would be. So I think that's as far as.
So just to be absolutely clear, the neighbour's building that you're referring to isn't the neighbouring, i.e. another building on the site of the applicant. This is a building that is totally separate, nothing to do with this application, and is actually a building that is by somebody else who lives along that area. Is that? That's
my understanding. Yes, I mean
so it's a neighbour's building rather than a neighbouring
building. I mean, because I didn't take this photo myself, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm just taking it at face value of what the applicant said on that.
Possibly the agent might be able to offer some further clarification on that when he has his opportunity to speak in a moment. Councillor Vachon, did that answer your question?
Not wholly. I mean, this is one of the reasons I asked for the site visit, because it is very, very confusing in that area. I don't think that really does it. That the photographs do much justice to it, actually, and I'd rather have more information. Tell you the truth.
Okay, thank you. But you did understand the reason why we couldn't have a site visit?
I do understand that. Yes.
Yes. It wouldn't have been legal to do so. Councillor Cheadle.
Yes, it was just that the planning officer, Mr. Gibbons, mentioned in his opening statement there was an enforcement issue on site which he would return to, and then didn't return to it.
Yes, yep, sorry about that. I did say that, you're right. Yes, I have spoken to the enforcement officer on the site, Reg Willing. I had a discussion with him last week, and it was mainly to do with this this building here that's under construction, because I thought that it would be good to clarify what that is for. It is on the enforcement officer's radar. However, discussions with the applicant is that is in fact a Class E general permitted development building, which would require it to be used in incidentally to the dwelling house 129. So there isn't, having spoken to the enforcement officer, there's, until it's on the radar, we're monitoring it if it's a Class E building that's permitted development, and therefore it's granted planning permission by the general permitted development order and doesn't require planning permission from the local planning authority.
Thank you. And if I could just come in with a supplementary, why is this application retrospective?
because the building has been built. The building's
I
there.
just wondered, did the applicant believe that this was within permitted development rights as well?
I don't know. I mean, I haven't actually discussed that with the agent.
Oh, well, we can ask that later on, perhaps.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, whether an applicant has already built something out or they're bringing it forward, it wouldn't make any difference to our decision. It's not a material planning reason anyway. I don't know if Mr. Weimer wants to add a little bit more on that particular issue when there has been a retrospective application.
Thank you. Not much more to add, Chair, to be honest. The fact this retrospective shouldn't make any difference in how we determine the matter, and nor should it be have any difference as to why it's retrospective, whether the building was built with the applicants thinking it was permitted development and didn't need permission, or whether they were fully aware that it required consent but they chose to build it anyway. Neither of those matters should bear any have any weight in your determination. What we're looking at is the building acceptable, yes or no?
Thank you. Where have I got to? Councillor Moyes, I think you had a question, then Councillor Enders.
Yeah, sorry to come back again. The neighbouring building, is that a holiday let or what? Do we know?
I don't know. I don't know that much. I don't know about the neighbouring building. I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Councillor Enders.
My question was actually partly covered by Councillor Cheadle. I was just curious to know how long the building had already been there for, only because it looks like it's going to blend quite well in with the fact that there's moss and stuff growing on the top of it. So it was just, I know it's not material, but I was just curious to see how long it had been there for. That was all.
I'm afraid I haven't got that information to hand. However, the applicant is registered the agent's registered to speak, so they may be able to provide some more clarity on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I do have a couple of questions myself, if I may, Mr. Gibbons. One is, I think just for clarity really for members, is one of the reasons for call-in was that there was concern expressed about the foundation pilings as to whether they'd be sufficient. Now that would sit under building control, wouldn't it? But I think it might be worth having confirmation of that, given that it's in the reason for call-in.
Yes, yes, it would be a building control issue there. If I just show you the planning drawing, you can see there it's sat on a plinth, but building control would ensure that those foundations meet with the building regulation requirements.
Thank you. And I had another question, which was actually with regard to the parking. I just wanted to get some clarification on this. If you can go back to the slide that shows I think it was about 10 parking spaces, yeah. Which in your report you refer to the supplementary planning document that would identify that the equivalent to hotel use essentially requires 1 space per guest room plus 1 space for a manager. And then in your report, you talk about site having good level of access and sufficient car parking on site to accommodate this use, with 10 spaces provided for a total of 4 holiday lets and the main dwelling, which is in excess of the standard. But I did want to query this because while we are looking at purely just at that particular application, there is other as you say, there are other holiday lets, plus the property at 129 Station Road, I believe, has an annex, and I'm not 100% certain, but I think also might be have lets in it, flats in it, in which case there could potentially, what is the position then with regard to the parking over the whole of the curtilage rather than purely on this particular application because of the cumulative, can't get that word out, impact?
Yes, no problem at all. The application before us is simply for the bird hive. Sorry, the beehive. But as you say, there are existing units on there. So my understanding, having spoken to the enforcement officer last week, who has a probably better understanding given the planning history here to myself, that there is the yurt. Which is there. You've got the birds box, which is there, and you've got the beehive, and then you've got the house, which he had advised me there was an annex, and also I think 2 holiday lets. So if we just focus on the holiday lets first, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So which would be formed of the 2 holiday lets, the bird hive, beehive, bird box, and the yurt. So that's 5 in total. So if you're looking at the standard in the SPD, just have to refresh myself, I think it is in the report. C1 hotel uses require 1 space per guest room plus 1 space for the manager. So the starting point to go to with this isn't a C1 use wouldn't necessarily be a hotel use. This wouldn't necessarily be a hotel use, because a hotel use is a little bit different, but it's the closest within the SPD that we've got. So if you're looking at those five units of holiday accommodation, you would require 5 parking spaces plus the 1 for the manager. So that's 6 in total. So there's 10 on site, and then the remaining would be for the house, and the annex. So you would have two parking spaces for the house and 2 spaces for the annex. But with this one, you've got to also bear in mind that the house is also the manager, so there could be some flexibility around that. So I think officers were confident there was sufficient parking on the site for the amount of development that's existing and proposed.
Thank you. And clearly Highways haven't objected, given the fact that the lane is a single one-way lane, essentially, which just goes in one direction. It's not possible to come out the other side. And Highways haven't made any objection with that extra traffic.
No, they haven't. That's great.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Weimer had a comment he wanted to bring in.
Yes, Chairman, thank you. I've just looked at the application form, and the application form sets out that the building was constructed in 2018.
Ah, right. Thank you. Okay, we don't have any more questions, so I will now move to registered speakers, and I will get them in the right order this time. So Mr. Blakeman is the agent who is registered to speak. Good afternoon, or even good morning to you, Mr. Blakeman. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Can you hear me okay?
I can indeed. Just to let you know, as I think you've probably already been advised by one of our members of staff, is that you'll have 3 minutes in which to make your presentation. Mr. Young will give you a 30-second warning when you're getting near the end, and I would ask that you then do begin to wrap up, because I will need to stop you at the 3-minute period. And when you're ready in your own time, please do feel free to start. Thank you.
Fine, thank you. I hope you can all hear me okay. I'm the agent for the application, or for the applicant in this case. Firstly, I'd like to thank the case officer, I think has given us a fair appraisal and prepared a fair report in respect of the application. You'll all be aware that the application has received some objections, and I would like to respond to those that I feel are material for your consideration. Perhaps the most important of these would be the possible effect of the construction on Simmons Park. And you have been raising queries about the neighbour's building, which is shown on the photograph I'm seeing on the screen at the moment. This building, although the enforcement officer is aware of this building, it is nothing to do with my applicant, and it's not on the applicant's land. You see it fairly clearly in the photographs from January. Where it's quite visible from the park. I suspect, but I obviously don't know, I suspect that these buildings were constructed at about the same time. Neither of them are actually permitted development as such. Neither of them have permission as such. Maybe this one will a little bit later today. That's a decision for you. But clearly, I think that the Town Council have considered that the building you can see outlined in pink was probably the application building, because it was constructed about the same time, but it isn't. So I'm pleased that you've managed to see those photographs. The next point I'd like to make was highways, and I don't think I need to say much about that because the highways have confirmed there's no visual impact. The site itself is well related to the Granite Way and the station, well related to the town. The business is successful. Bookings have only just been started and being taken again since the lockdown. And within about the past week or so, it's now almost fully booked until December. There's 14 bookings already for next year. There's 6 days spare in November, and 3 bookings are taken for December. So if you want to go and stay there, you need to get in quickly. The business itself supports the town shops, restaurants, cafes, pubs, and other local facilities attractions within the area. Finally, to finish off, the building has been filmed for Channel 4 George Clark's Amazing Spaces. The conclusions of that building were, it is truly unique, absolutely incredible, masterful use of recycled materials, it truly is an amazing space. I hope you can support the officer's recommendation, but if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blakeman. Well done, within your time. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Blakeman, please? It would appear not, Mr. Blakeman. Thank you very much indeed for your time. I would ask if you'd be kind enough just to remute yourself. Of course, you're welcome to stay and listen. Councillor, we now have Councillor Goffey again from Oakhampton Town Council, who has as much experience on this remote meeting as the rest of us, I think. So I won't rehearse what I said to you before, Councillor Goffey. I'll just simply say when you're ready, then please do start your presentation. Thank you.
Sorry,
thank you very much. That's all right. Thank you very much. I was muted there, so I was saying thank you very much. Can you hear me 4 times before I got a response? Right. Firstly, to quickly answer some of the questions raised by members, the applicant is fully aware of planning requirements because we have already had dealings with her over the year. So she is well aware that she should apply for planning in advance of building. The Town Council were minded to recommend refusal for this yet another retrospective application from this resident. The property is accessed via a narrow private road, which is also a bridle path to Fatherford. This is very popular with local walkers, cyclists, as well as horse riders. The site is very steep and multiple holiday lets have been built onto a wooded site overlooking Simmons Park and the town. Were the stability of the site to become compromised by excessive rainfall, for example, or damage to tree roots, the resultant landslide could be horrific. There are only a few properties along this stretch of private road, all occupied by local residents, and the multiple occupancy of both 129 and its multiple holiday accommodation is causing local residents much distress due to traffic increase, noise and disruption of the peace and tranquility of their environment on the very edge of the town. I note there is not one single letter of support from the residents affected, and I feel this should be of concern to the committee. On planning grounds, the woods around these premises are home to many species of protected animals, including dormice. This property is extremely visible from Simmons Park, depending on where you stand, and also depending on the time of year. The neighbouring property, which comment has been made upon, is the Coach House. It was renovated in the 1980s and was an existing building. So that is a renovation, not a new build. Every application put forward by this person has been retrospective, and it is important to send the message firmly that this is not acceptable. I know your planning officer has just said you should disregard that, but the planning rules are there for a reason. And the reason is that we need to know what is being built before it is being built. The proliferation of holiday accommodation at this address is not suitable for the local environment, and the increase in vehicular traffic is dangerous both to pedestrian and other ambulance traffic. So that is the conclusion of what I have to say, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goffey. Councillor Goffey, can I ask you a question? It's a practical one, actually, because I know you're in on the phone, I believe. Are you able to see the slides or not?
No, I wasn't able to see the slides.
Right.
No.
Okay.
No.
That's I wanted to just clarify, because the actual neighbouring building, it isn't the coach house that is being shown.
Right.
I know that from my local knowledge.
Yeah, well, that's why I assumed when you talked about a neighbouring building. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I can see Councillor Cheadle is typing. I don't know if he has a question. If so, just come straight in, Councillor Cheadle.
I don't have a question for Councillor Goffey.
Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Posing a question for the planning officer later.
Okay, right. Okay, fine. In that case, thank you very much, Councillor Goffey, for your time. And as before, you are welcome to remain in the meeting until we get to the end of this application. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so our next speaker is Councillor Paul Vachon, who is the ward member, and he, as before, has 5 minutes. Again, members can ask questions afterwards. So over to you, Councillor Vachon.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very, very confused site, as has been alluded to. There's quite a lot of little holiday cottages, etc., around there. A lot of history to this site. My main concern is actually I saw this building from Simmons Park in the winter, and it is quite prominent. Despite the photographs, if you move around to the left, you can actually see this quite starkly. It's the steepness of the slope which concerns me more than anything. I don't know whether a geological report was actually done on the site before the building took place. They've answered some of my questions regarding the sewage waste, which will be pumped back up, but the water from rain, etc., surface water, will be just going down to, I understand, just soaking away below it. The actual drawings of the elevation drawings don't actually show the steepness of the slope below this building. It does drop off quite rapidly below down to the river, and above this property there is the other building which we talked about, the contentious building, which is also built on a level cutting into the slope. My worry again was how would this affect the beehive which is below it, especially regarding water and drainage coming down into that area. It's a shame that that permission wasn't gained before building, because I think we would have had probably a few more reports. But I understand that some of the reports and one from the natural environment specialist hasn't actually visited the site, yet they've said they don't see any problem with it. The other conditions that were imposed earlier regarding visibility from the bridle path was by putting in a laurel hedge. We've noticed that a section of that laurel hedge has now been taken away, and that another new parking area has been placed above alongside the bridleway. Again, I don't know how that affects the ground below it, and whether the water runoff from that actually will affect this building. Hence the need I felt for a site visit. I don't think I can add any more to that at the moment. I understand conditions will be implied for the sewerage system, and I think that has to be put in place within 3 months of any decision of affirmation. So I can't add any more to that.
Thank you, Councillor Vachon. I can see a couple have indicated that they wish to question the planning officer, but at the moment, does anybody have any questions for Councillor Vachon? It would appear not. Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Vachon.
Thank you.
Okay, I have now 2 members who wish to ask questions. And could I please just remind members just to type the word question in the chat box rather than out loud your question. Your question can be brought out when you get invited to come in. So Councillor Cheadle, then Councillor Pearce.
Thank you. The reason for typing it was only to give the planning officer a bit of notice. In his summary, the planning officer suggested that were further development of this site to take place, that might be a cause of concern. I think rather putting in our minds the sort of creeping nature of this development. Given that my understanding is that most of this development takes place prior to a planning application being submitted, is it possible to frame a condition on this application to prohibit further development of the site?
I'll request David Fairbairn to answer that one. He might be able to give us a bit more clarity from a legal perspective. I'll just be very cautious though, bearing in mind the previous decision where conditions were placed on the permission and they were appealed, and the appeal was allowed on 2 of the 4, I understand, and the costs were also awarded. So I'll hopefully ask David to answer that more thoroughly than myself, but just to draw that to members' attention.
Good morning, members. I think I have to agree with Mr. Gibbons that the prospect of successfully defending any condition in those terms would be impossible, I would suggest. I don't see that there's any way that we as a local planning authority can restrict somebody from carrying out development. It is up to us, if the development has harmful effects, to then seek to take enforcement action or to encourage a respective application. But I think ultimately we cannot pursue a condition along the lines Councillor Cheadle would like us to. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And just for clarity for members, in actual fact, when the planning officer is presenting his screen, he can't actually see the chat box, okay? Which is another reason just for typing in the word question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. My question to the planning officer is, Mr. Gibbons, surely this is overdevelopment of a rural garden, which is likely to be having a detrimental impact on the amenity value of nearby residents and nearby properties and their occupiers and residents, which prevents them from having peaceful enjoyment of their property and garden. Would this be correct in your view?
I think you're right to highlight, Councillor Pearce, that it is a garden and it's surrounded by residential properties. It is a fairly large piece of land though, in terms of its relationship with surrounding properties. I know there is the coach house, which is located to the south, but there are a fair amount of space between the sites. We carefully did look at these issues because obviously amenities are a key consideration for us in determining planning applications, and neighbouring amenities are a really significant material planning consideration. So we did look at these considerations, but on balance we felt that we could mitigate the impacts through conditions. We could look at a management plan which could put into place mechanisms to limit, for example, when people can arrive at the site, to minimise noise and disturbance at antisocial hours. We could look at ensuring there's more effective signage so that any overspill traffic or people visiting the site is contained within the site. With those conditions in mind, we felt that we could support the principle of the development without giving rise to a significant loss of neighbouring amenity. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want to
Thank
come
you,
back,
Mr.
Councillor
Gibbons.
Pearce? You're happy with that? Didn't want to come back, Councillor Pearce?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? It would appear not. So therefore, I will move the recommendation as laid out on page 12, which is for the officer's recommendation is for approval. Councillor Pearce, are you happy to second that
Yes, I'm happy to second that proposal, Chairman. Sorry.
Thank you. Members, we are now in debate. Does anybody wish to speak in debate? Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you. I shall somewhat reluctantly find myself supporting this application. And the reason I have that reluctance is that I abhor the fact that people develop and then retrospectively ask for permission. And also, I feel that with this development, the scope for further development of this site no longer exists. And I probably can't put it more strongly than that, that were a subsequent application for this site come along, I'd find myself very, very unable to support it. But I will support this development.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. I have Councillor Vachon, Councillor Renders and Councillor Moyes. So, Councillor Vachon.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I still have my concerns over this. It changes the whole character of the landscape that it's actually in. It's a beautiful wooded valley with a Victorian park below it, and this is very visible. I think it's actually changing the character of this beautiful area. And I think the more development that goes on, that will make it worse. I can understand that the advantage is through tourism and encouraging people to visit the town, which I'm all for. I'm not sure this is the right place to actually do that. And I think if I would object to this, and I think I will, it would be under the Dev 23, which is under Dev 23.1, it has to be located and designed to respect scenic quality and maintain an area's distinctive sense of place and reinforce local distinctiveness. And I honestly don't believe that actually does that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Renders, please.
Yes, I think I would reiterate what Councillor Cheadle said. It's one of my pet gripes as well, is the fact that people continue to build and then seek retrospective. I probably will also be voting for this, but it is with a great annoyance. That's what I'm going to say on that one there. But Councillor Cheadle did actually speak for me, but thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Moyes and Councillor Hipsey.
Yes, I feel this is a holiday camp situation growing in a residential area, and I will be voting against it.
Thank you. Councillor Hipsey.
I agree with Councillor Renders. Thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Renders and Councillor Cheadle that although it's obviously not a proper planning condition, the retrospective nature, the continued retrospective nature of applications on this site is more than concerning, and I think this is probably a good place to make our concerns known. The other thing is, I'm not entirely sure. One of the reasons that Councillor Vachon has brought this in is concern about the pilings and the foundation to this building. I'm not sure that we've addressed that enough. I'm still a bit concerned about the slope, the foundation and the pilings. I don't know if anybody can help me with that.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this is one for Mr. Weimer or for the planning officer, because it does sit within building regs, but who would like to take this?
Yes, I mean it would need building regulation approval. Any building would need to conform with building regulations, and that would look at the suitability of the construction of the foundation. So it would be a building regulation issue as opposed to a planning issue.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, I'm not sure how that will be addressed, given that this building already exists. Would there be some sort of inspection of the building now that we've stated our concern?
I don't know if I think Pat would he be able to provide some advice on this matter?
Yeah, the The bottom line, members, is this is a matter for building control, and how the South Devon Building Control Partnership deal with retrospective applications would be a matter for them. My previous experience is if there's any concerns, then they will go and get part of the piling or foundations exposed so they can see exactly what has been done. My belief from retrospective building control, and that's me making an assumption that they didn't have building control building regulations approval and it wasn't inspected during the course of the construction, because it may well have been, but if it hasn't, then retrospective building control applications have to be dealt with by local authorities and can't be dealt with by approved inspectors. But it would be a matter for the Building Control Partnership to satisfy themselves that the building regs were complied with.
Thank you very much.
And just for clarity, Mr. Weimer, that the planning department, this department would advise building control then if this application was approved or refused, essentially, to ensure that that was carried out.
Can I come in there, Chair, please?
Yes, certainly.
Yes, I mean, should this application be approved, then building control will pick it up as they do with other normal applications that are approved.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I thought it was useful to have that absolutely clarified. Did you wish to make a separate comment, Councillor Pearce?
Yes, I do, Chairman. I have to agree with Councillor Vacheron. I'm really concerned about the creeping development on this site. We've seen pictures today that there's another building being built, which is to do with the main house. I think that was what the planning officer referred to. Had we had this application come forward some years ago for all these buildings on this site as one, it is extremely unlikely that would have been improved. So I do have concerns that we've got creeping development here in quite a rural area. It's, you know, although it's the main house is situated in Station Road, it is right on the edge of the rural area leading up to the moor. So, you know, and also you've got Simmons Park down below. So like Councillor Vacheron, I cannot support the officer's recommendation on this one.
Thank you. I think we just do need to be clear, though, that other building that is going on that is outside the red line actually can't be taken into account in our terms of when we determine. We can only determine what is the application before us, which is within the red line that the planning officer has shown us. Any other comments from anybody? Okie dokie, nope. In that case, we will be taking this one to the vote, and we have before us as a recommendation to approve the application. Again, Mrs. Hall will ask each councillor to confirm you are present for the entire item, and will take the vote for, against, or abstain. Over to you, Mrs. Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I will ask you all in turn to confirm you are present and have heard all of the debate and then take your vote. Thank you. Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you. I was here throughout the debate and heard it all, and I support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Crozier.
I've heard all the debate and I support reluctantly this proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Hipsey.
I was present throughout and I support the officer's report.
Thank you.
Recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Mott.
Thank you. I was present throughout the conversation and presentation, and I, like others, reluctantly support the officer.
You cut out a bit, Caroline. Could I have your vote again, please?
My apologies. I reluctantly support the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Moyes.
Yes, I was present throughout the debate and I will be voting against.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
Yes, thank you. I was present throughout the debate and the presentation. Unfortunately, I cannot support the officer's recommendation at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Ratcliffe.
I was present for the duration of the debate and I support the officer's recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Renders.
Yes, I can confirm that I was here throughout the debate, and I'm another reluctant supporter. I will go with the recommendation of the officer.
Thank you. Councillor Vashon.
Yes, I was present throughout the entire presentation. I'm against it.
Thank you. And Councillor Yelland.
I confirm present throughout and I vote against.
Thank you. So that's 6 for and 4 against. So it has been carried as approved. Thank you.
So thank you very much. Confirm that that application is approved. And I say thank you very much again to the agent and Councillor Coffey, respectively, for your time. And Ms Young will now escort you back into the lobby, and you are welcome to continue to listen to the rest of the meeting live on YouTube if you so wish. We will now need to bring in our next speakers. So I think we probably will need to adjourn. I want to just check with Ms Young how long we will need to adjourn for to enable them to be brought in.
I wonder, Chair, if we could have a 10-minute break.
Okay, that's fine. Lovely. So it is 11:46 now, according to my clock. So shall we re-adjourn at 11:55 to keep it simple? Okay, members, in the meantime, I would ask you to all mute your microphones, keep your videos off, keep the chat box empty as the live streaming will continue. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. It is 11:55. Ms. Young, are you able to confirm if the registered speakers are both in?
I can confirm that Mr. Rowan has joined the conversation.
Thank you, and I can see Councillor Moody is here. Ms. Hall, could you please just take the roll call to confirm everybody's present that we're quorate? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Cheadle.
Yep, I'm here.
Councillor Crozier.
Yep, here.
Councillor Hipsey.
Present.
Councillor Mott.
Present.
Councillor Moyes.
Present.
Councillor Pearce.
Present.
Councillor Ratcliffe.
Present.
Councillor Renders.
Present.
Councillor Vachon.
Present.
And Councillor Yelland.
Present.
Thank you. And just for clarification for those listening into the meeting, I can confirm that the following officers are present. Mr. Fairburn, the Borough Solicitor, Mr. Weimer, Head of Development Management, Mr. Gibbons, the Planning Case Officer, Ms. Young is the Gatekeeper, and myself, Mrs. Hall, Democratic Services Officer, and also Mr. Baker from the JLP team. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so we now have before us planning application number 4092-19, which is for full, which relates to Herdwick Golf Club House, Herdwick, Tavistock. And I would ask the planning officer if he could please start his presentation. Many thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Just an update for you regarding the condition on the Tamar Valley, the Tamar mitigation for the EMES. The applicants have now submitted a discharge of planning condition application to seek to pay the mitigation measures required, and as a result, that condition is no longer necessary on this planning application recommendation. So moving to the application, this application is for the replacement, sorry, just a moment, I was on the wrong screen. A construction of a new dwelling on the existing redundant golf clubhouse, which is located at what was the Herdwick Golf Course to the north of Oakhampton. The application is about 1 kilometre north of Oakhampton, and there are other buildings on the site in the form of an existing dwelling and some other buildings which I understand are now in agricultural use.
Mr. Gibbons, could I just confirm, you said north of Oakhampton?
Oh, sorry, north of Tavistock, sorry.
Unless we've had a quick change, a seismic event,
Yeah.
which is possible, I do agree.
Yes, sorry, just to confirm, yeah, it's located on the eastern side of Tavistock, about 1 kilometre north of the town itself, and it forms part of the redundant Herdwick Golf Club. The building is currently disused, and it was a clubhouse to be used as part of the golf club. The site is not within AONB, but it is set within the collection of other buildings. The application is for remove the existing building, demolish the existing building, and to construct a new 3-bedroom dwelling bungalow. So if I go through the proposal, and then I'll come back to the planning history and the policies around the proposal. So this photo is an aerial photo of the site. You can see where my mouse is now. There's a collection of buildings around a small copse of woods, and this is where the site is located. As you can see on the submitted plan there, the red line boundary goes around that bungalow, which was originally built as a bungalow but then converted into a clubhouse. Access is provided through the what was the golf club course to the site, back onto the main road there to the west. The proposal is for a hipped roof building that will be constructed from natural slate with a natural stone construction cladding. We'll see that in a moment. These are the floor plans. If I just zoom in, you should be able to see them in a bit more detail. So it's a 3-bedroomed dwelling house, large lounge, and 3 bedrooms there. The built form of the development, as I indicated, is a natural slate roof, and then you've got block and render walls, and then some good quality Herdwick stone facing materials. Again, if I zoom in, you'll be able to see that, with UPVC rainwater goods and timber effect UPVC windows and doors. So it will be built to a modern standard for insulation purposes and thermal efficiency. If I just go back to the existing building, we'll see these on the photos in a moment, but this is the existing clubhouse. You can see it's a fairly disjointed development. It's probably been extended to over the years by its form. You've got a large sort of conservatory on the front there, and then it was, in fact, this is the floor plan, a 3-bedroomed dwelling. That's what's been granted permission for it to be used as a 3-bedroom dwelling. So this is the building in question. The clubhouse is there on that right-hand side, with that large conservatory you can see on the front, and then its relationship with the neighbouring buildings there, and the woods behind there, the coppice I talked about. You can see that there, photo taken in the January period. This is a photo from the entrance. Again, you can see it just behind that tree. You can see the existing building. It's fairly poorly constructed, really, with the nature of the construction. It's timber clad. Sorry. So there's the aerial photograph again. So just in terms of the consultation responses, we've got consultation response from highways, no highway implication, no objection from drainage, a town council objection based on unjustified loss of recreational facilities, unjustified development in the countryside, and badly related to public services, and reliability, needing to rely on the private car. Natural England have advised that there need to be measures to mitigate the impact of the development. No representations reported. Now this is quite significant. The existing planning permission here, which dates from 2019, and that was approved only last year by the council for the change of use of the clubhouse to a dwelling. And that was also for a 3-bedroom dwelling. So there is a planning permission there that can be implemented, and the applicants have confirmed that they would implement that if as a position. Because in their supporting statement they said it would be better to implement this proposal, but that doesn't discount that they wouldn't implement the existing one. So in terms of the policy, there's a variety of policies. I mean, the starting point with any development in this location is the settlement hierarchy, which is policy TTV 21. The site would be located in the countryside because it's not part of a settlement identified within that settlement hierarchy, and as such it would be placed within part 4 of that hierarchy, which is the countryside. So the application would partially need to be considered under policy TTV 26. The site is not isolated because the site is related to other buildings, as we saw in the photographs, so it cannot be considered to be isolated, taking into the Braintree consideration. But part 2 of the policy talks about the reuse of redundant buildings. There needs to be considered how development will enhance the immediate setting of the site, including a management plan So we'll consider those issues further within the design section. But there is also a material planning consideration that also needs to be considered, because planning permission was granted in 2019 for the conversion of the clubhouse to a detached dwelling. And this is a material consideration because it is a fallback position, and there's a real prospect that there is a fallback for that dwelling to be implemented. And that's a case of planning judgment. Members will need to take into account the fallback when they implementing the earlier permission, and not to do so would be failure to have a regard to a material planning consideration. Then there's also the policy requirement under policy TTV 29, and this is for residential extensions and replacements of dwellings in the countryside. Policy TTV 29 does allow for proposals to extend or replace existing dwellings in the countryside, and there are a set of policy criteria around those issues. The SPD identifies how the proposal will relate to significant change and how those considerations can be taken into account in the determination under policy TTV 29. A significant change in the SPD is talked about regarding the impact on the visual impact, consideration on the harmful visual impact of any changes, and also whether the size of the dwelling by bedrooms results in the proposal failing to meet local housing need. In this instance, the proposal is an improvement to the appearance of the existing dwelling because of the nature of the proposed design. It incorporates good use of natural materials and a more integrated design proposal to achieve a better quality design, both in terms of visual impact and also in terms of the sustainability through the use of improved materials and better thermal efficiency. Furthermore, the site redevelopments will still maintain a 3-bedroom dwelling, so it's not resulting in a proposed change to the nature of the housing stock, so it is able to be supported through policy TTV 29. So as a result, the principle of the development can be supported through the use of this, through the joint local plan, through the policies identified. Before I go on to design and external appearance, I'm just going to touch quickly on the Town Council's response in terms of the loss of leisure facilities. The golf club has been understood to be closed for a period of at least 3 years, and when I was out there on site, it was the site was being used for agriculture with sheep grazing there. So as a result, there can't be any objections to the loss of facilities on this site. So moving to the design of the building, if I go back to the plans, has got a much better design in terms of its appearance. It has a stronger design aesthetic on the front. At the moment, the southeast elevation is fronted by a conservatory, which detracts from the appearance of the house. This is a much better quality design and a much better quality design proposal. The building will use better quality materials. We've got a natural slate roof there, which relates more to the local vernacular of properties within the area. You've also got the use of a natural stone, Herdwick stone, which reinforces the local distinctiveness as a natural material, and as a result, the proposal is considered to enhance the immediate setting of the site and comply with policy TTV 26. Moving forward, given the site's relationship with adjoining properties, it is not considered to give rise to a significant loss of residential amenity, and the local highway authority has identified there are no highway implications as a result of this development. So as a result, I'll just touch on a couple more points, sorry. details have been submitted of a drainage scheme, so there's no objection to this from the drainage officer. The site is not located within a mineral consultation zone, and the development will replace an existing building which has poor thermal efficiency. The building with modern materials will enable the development to comply with policy DEV 32. As a result, the application is recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Gibbons. We have quite a lot of questions, so I have currently waiting Councillors Moyes, Cheadle, Vachon, Mott and Hipsey. So I go to Councillor Moyes first. Thank you.
Yes, in your photographs, you had quite a newish, modern-looking building almost alongside. What is that, please?
Sorry, I'm just going to go back to the photos. Is that to the left-hand side?
Yes.
I understand that's a dwelling. I understand. To be honest, I don't actually know, but I understand it is just from being out on site.
Close by. Okay,
Yeah,
thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you. Councillor Cheadle.
Yes. You mentioned in your presentation that there had been a previously approved application, which in a sense would be the fallback should this not be approved. I just wondered if you could very quickly outline what the difference between that application and this one is.
Yes, yeah, no problem at all. I think I've got a slide here. This is the floor plan of the planning permission that was granted in 2019. So internally, you can see that the building has still got 3 bedrooms, so it's the same size. The floor plan is different. This new proposal, I think, is about 9% larger, so it is slightly larger. But you're losing the large conservatory on the front. If I just show you the front elevation, that's the front elevation there.
Sorry, Mr. Gibbons, could I just pause you for a moment, please, while we clarify if Councillor Ratcliffe is able to hear the presentation or not?
Yeah, we just pause a second.
Councillor Ratcliffe, can you confirm that you can hear again now, please?
Yes, I can. I've just, in the last 10 seconds, I've come back, but I probably dropped out at about 12:10.
Could you then confirm, Councillor Ratcliffe, did you hear Councillor Cheadle's question?
I did not, no.
Okay, I will ask him to. Did you hear Councillor Moyes and her question?
No, I didn't hear that either. It was towards the end of the officer's report.
Okie dokie. In that case, could I have some guidance from Democratic Services then as to Councillor Radcliffe's position when it comes to the vote?
I think if Councillor Moyes wouldn't mind just asking her question again and just sort of going over that, and then Councillor Cheadle, and just sort of catch up that way, then Councillor Ratcliffe hasn't missed anything. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. It's because your question was an easy one to answer, Councillor Moyes. So would you mind repeating it for the officer to repeat the answer, and then we'll go to Councillor Cheadle. Thank you.
Yes, in your photographs, the officer's photographs, there was quite a newish looking building, and I was wondering what that was.
And Mr. Gibbons, your response was?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Moyes. I understand that as a dwelling, although I don't know that for certain because I've just been to the site. I didn't really look at that dwelling in situ, but I understand it is a dwelling.
Thank you. And now back to Councillor Cheadle, if you'd be kind enough to repeat your question. Thank you.
Yes, my question was that in your report you referred to the fact that there was an already approved planning application for a three-bedroomed, I think you said a three-bedroomed house on the site. My question was effectively what's the difference between what was already approved and it would become the fallback option and what is now being approved? And could I just sort of add to that question, because I may have misunderstood, was the previously approved application simply using the clubhouse as a house? It looks as though it was, rather than, in a sense, taking it down and rebuilding it into a completely different sort of building.
Yeah, yes, that's right. It was the reuse of the existing building, so just repurposing the internal layout.
Right, got it. Thank you very much.
So,
Yeah, that's fine.
but the changes are the increase is 8.6% larger. The original floor plan was 115 square meters. This is 125, and the ridge height has increased by 2.65 meters.
Yeah, but the essential difference is the first application was simply reusing the existing clubhouse as a house, and this one is a completely redesigned house.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
And now, Councillor Vachon, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Mr. Gibbons. I've probably got this wrong, but right at the beginning of the presentation, you were talking about the clubhouse. Was there a previous building on that clubhouse, and was that clubhouse converted into it from the original residential building?
Yes, that's although I haven't been able to identify any planning history as such, I understand that it was built as a dwelling originally, and then became a clubhouse. And yes, it was originally built as a dwelling, and then became a clubhouse. That's right.
Thank you. Can I have a supplementary to that, Chair?
Certainly.
If that is the case, this is a building to replace the clubhouse and that previous building. Does the TTV 29 take into consideration the size or the footprint of the original bungalow in this new application?
Yes, it does. I mean, within the SPD that's emerging, the SPD talks about how the development will impact, whether it will have a significant change or not. The significant change relates to two elements. The first is whether it will have a harmful visual impact, and the second is whether the size of the dwelling will result in the development failing to meet local needs. So in terms of the first criteria, it's considered that the improvement to the development in terms of its materials will not result, and design will not result in a significant or a harmful visual impact. And the size of the dwelling, although it is about 9% larger, it is being maintained at a three-bedroomed dwelling house. So there's no change in that in regards to how it relates to local housing need.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mott, then Councillor Hipsey.
Thank you, Chair. My question, please, is, and I will be looking to put this as part of the recommendation, please, is it possible to remove permitted development rights from this application, please? I appreciate that they've got a standing application which has permission, and I have to say that this design proposed is an improvement on that, so I welcome that, but I'm mindful of the concerns that have been expressed by others. So my question then is it possible to put removal of permitted development on this application, please?
Yeah, I can come back to that one. Yes, the MPPG does advise against using restrictions of permitted development universally now, and requires us to give it particular consideration. However, with this proposal, we have got some justification regarding permitted development rights because of the relationship with policy TTV 29, and that relates to the development meeting local housing needs. So I think in those circumstances where we're seeking to ensure that new development comes forward to meet local housing needs, we would be justified in seeking to remove permitted development rights for those reasons.
Thank you. So to check, Councillor Mott, is that something you would like added to the recommendation when I come to move it later on?
I would, please. Thank you, Chair.
And we'll see if we can get a seconder for that at the time. Okay, I have Mr. Weimer wishes to come in. Come back to you in a moment, Councillor Hipsey, but let Mr. Weimer come in because it'll be on this particular issue.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have any concerns regarding Mr. Gibbons's response. I've got a question though. Is Councillor Mott just referring to the removal of permitted development rights for extensions, or also seeking to remove permitted development rights for things like garden sheds and ancillary buildings? Like, I absolutely see the logic and the reason behind removing permitted development rights for extensions, and that would ensure that the dwelling does continue to comply with policy TTV 29. I think there's a little bit more discussion to be had to see if there's a reason, justification to removing permitted development rights for things like garden sheds. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mott, did you wish to come back on that one?
Thank you. Certainly for extensions, although I'm mindful that permitted development does allow an awful lot these days with regard to sheds and ancillary dwellings. So my concern also would be that if there was a significant ancillary dwelling put there as well, bearing in mind its remote location and just generally where it is. So I think if I could, I would be tempted to include ancillary dwellings and sheds, etc.
Mr. Weimer?
That's fine. I was just seeking clarification of exactly what it is members were looking to remove.
Okay, thank you. I will make sure we include that in the recommendation when we come to it. Councillor Hipsey, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have just a couple of questions. One's just for clarity, really. If I could ask Mr. Gibbons, please, just to clarify the increase in size of the building from the existing clubhouse. I think during your briefing you said 6% larger, or maybe 9%, but on page 4 of the report we talk about it being 20% bigger. I wonder if you could just clarify which of those is correct, please.
Yes, no problem at all. Yes, I have looked at the figures, and the increase is 10 square meters, which works out at 8.6% larger. The 20% figure is that was the emerging guidance within the SPD, one of the earlier drafts of the supplementary planning guidance. Supplementary planning documents.
Oh, I see, yes.
Requirements was 20%, but that figure has now been removed in the final draft as a result of consultation, I understand. So this proposal is for 8.6% bigger, which at the time was beneath the 20%.
Yeah, thank you for clearing that one up. The other question I have is regarding low carbon and renewable energy. SPT 1, Para 1, subclause 4, and Para 2, subclause 5 talks about, well, the first one says, will a low carbon economy be provided? The second one says, will the use of renewable energy be increased? Are there any plans to address those matters, please, in the design?
I think the proposal does seek to respond to the carbon demands of the development through its lifetime, through the use of better quality materials, so double glazing and insulation up to the specification required. I haven't actually seen any proposals for any on-site renewable energy with this proposal, so it could be something we could seek to address through a planning condition if necessary.
That's certainly something, Chair, if I may, something I would like to see, that if this is approved, we should have the maximum use of renewable energy. In particular, I take your point, Ms. Gibbons, about the low carbon issues being addressed by insulation, but I think at the very least we should be talking about insisting on solar energy in some way.
So for clarification, Councillor Ipsy, so I make sure I get this right when we move the recommendation, you would like included maximum use of renewable energy. Do we need to be more precise than that, Mr. Weimer?
Thank you, Chair. I'm a little bit nervous by the words maximum use of renewable energy. I'm absolutely happy with the condition placed on the consent that details of renewable energy, how renewable energy is going to be incorporated into the building and into the ongoing use moving forward is supplied in line with the JLP policy DEB 32. I'm uncomfortable with the word maximum, because if we take it to its nth degree, someone could argue, well, the maximum is they put a very large wind turbine in the garden, which is clearly required. I know that's a ridiculous example, but that's how it could get to by using the word. But I think absolutely happy with the condition, asking them to demonstrate that they are compliant with DEB 32 and how they're going to use renewable energy sources, whether that's air source, solar, or ground source.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You happy with that, Councillor Hipsey?
Yes, I am. Thanks.
Okie dokie. I'm writing this down so that it actually makes sense when I read it out. It doesn't mean it necessarily will, but I'm sure you'll put me right. Okay, so I think that is all our questions. I can't see anybody that I've actually missed on this. So I should now like to invite, we have the agent, Mr. Rowan. Can you confirm if you can hear me, Mr. Rowan?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Mr. Rowan, you have 3 minutes to speak. At the end of, or 30 seconds before your 3 minutes is up, Ms. Young will just give you a 30-second reminder, so you'll know to start to wrap up. At the end of your 3 minutes, then members will have the opportunity just to ask you any questions for clarity. And so over to you when you're ready. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I firstly turn to the officer's report, where it states that the key issues here is the impact on the character and appearance of the area. And that is a view which we certainly agree with. What this application is not about is whether a dwelling should be located on this site. That has already been decided by your authority on the 22nd of July 2019, when permission was given to change the use of the existing building on site. Whatever decision you come to today will not affect that extant position. And therefore, I agree with the officers that the real decision is the impact on the character and appearance of the area by the design of the building. The officers have accepted that design. The written report confirms that the design is in line with our own policy, and that's TTV 29 relating to size, and policy TTV 26, and that relates to location. Councillor Moody considers the building to be an unsustainable position in the open countryside, and that there is no definition in the JLP of settlement boundaries. He also refers to the existing building as not a residential building. Your officer report advises that, under policy TTV 26, the site cannot be considered isolated as it is less than 1 from Tavistock and is part of a group of buildings. He refers correctly to the Braintree judgment, which I'm sure you know about already. Also, I refer to the fallback position, which has been mentioned by the officer. Again, I understand you know the implications of that. And the implications are, if there's a consent on site already, then the position is set for a dwelling. In short, Chairman, there is a permission for a dwelling on this site already. That can't be taken away unless the authority revoke that permission with the relevant compensation. So there will be a dwelling here. What we're asking for is a different dwelling, and I would suggest to you a better dwelling, and you have your officers' very clear advice with respect to your own policies. And on behalf of my client, I would ask you to grant this application in line with a very clear officer advice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rowan. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Rowan? It would appear not. Mr. Rowan, thank you for your time. If you could remute yourself, and of course you are welcome to remain in the meeting until the determination. Next, we have in the normal course of events, we would have had maybe a representation from the Town Council. There was a request did come through, but it didn't come through till yesterday afternoon, which was actually too late, as the deadline was midday on the Thursday. And I did double check, and that request had not been made in a timely fashion. So therefore, there's no representation from the Tavistock Town Council here today, but we do have Councillor Moody, who is the ward member. And Councillor Moody, as you well know, I think, you have 5 minutes in which to speak, and you again will get a 30-second reminder, and then members could ask you questions for clarity. So when you are ready, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I speak as the ward member for Tavistock Town Council and West Devon Borough Council for Tavistock North. And Chair, I support the objection by the Town Council to the proposal on 3 grounds. First, this is undoubtedly an isolated development in the countryside. It doesn't meet an essential need for a rural worker, or protect a heritage asset, or secure the reuse of a redundant building, and doesn't claim to be an outstanding design. It is clearly contrary to policy TTV 26, paragraph 1. Officers say that it is not in an isolated development at all, and referred to the Braintree judgment to support their conclusion. Actually, that case simply says 2 things. One is that in planning, the word isolated has its ordinary English meaning not near to other places, and does not need more definition. The other is that it is up to the planning authority, you as committee members, to decide what isolated means. In making that decision, please bear in mind that this site is in the countryside. It's as the officer said, it's a kilometre from the edge of Tavistock boundary. It's 2.5 kilometres to the town centre. It's 3.5 kilometres to the primary school and 4 kilometres from the secondary school. It has no bus service, no footpath, no safe cycle route to any of the town's facilities. And if that isn't if it's not an isolated site, honestly, I don't know what is. If you decide that this is not an isolated site, then you will be telling the world that the policy TTV 26 allows developments to take place on sites 1.5 or 1 kilometre outside the settlement boundaries of West Devon towns. Incidentally, if you conclude that the site is isolated, then everything that the report says on pages 19 and 20 about TTV 26 in brackets 2 is irrelevant and should be ignored. The second objection is that being so far from the Tavistock facilities and being totally resilient on the private car, it conflicts very badly with policy SPT2 of the local plan, which says that sustainable development includes access to services and sustainable transport. Amongst other things, the maximum walking distance to the nearest convenience store should be about 800 metres, not 2.5 kilometres, and the maximum walking distance to the nearest primary school should be 800 metres, not 3.5 kilometres. If you look at TTV 26 in the JLP 5.168 on page 24 of the JLP, the local plan tells you to read policies TTV 26 and SPT2 together. If you do that, you can only conclude that as well as being isolated, this is an extremely unsustainable site. The third objection relates to the loss of recreational use. Officers say that the golf course has been closed for 3 years, and the officer just recently said that when he went out there, he found sheep grazing in the fields. This is a poor interpretation of the local plan. It is not a redundant golf course, it is a closed golf course. Policy DV3 2 brackets 1 states that you will resist such proposals unless an assessment has been undertaken which clearly shows the facilities to be surplus to requirements. The application has failed to entirely do this. It's very dangerous for the planning authority to say that simply because it is closed, a recreation facility must be surplus to requirements. Then that is an invitation to any operator of the private recreational facility to close it, knowing that there will be no scrutiny
30 seconds.
when an application for redevelopment comes forward. So moving on to the design, the fallback position, that as you will need to do is look at the applicants themselves, what they say in the design and access statement. They said that they would not carry out the previous application because it would be unsustainable and that it would not come up to current thermal insulation standards. So the
5 minutes, Councillor Moody.
Chair, ward councillors and Tavistock Council were ignored entirely in the previous planning application. Please hear us now, and I urge you to refuse permission for the three reasons.
Councillor Moody, I need to ask you just to finish your sentence. The time is up, please.
That's what I'm doing. Set out by the Town Council on page 19 of the report.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moody. I have a question from Councillor Cheadle, but Mr. Fairburn just wanted to come in a minute. Mr. Fairburn.
Yes. Sorry, Chairman. That's it. I just think there's a couple of things that I think I need to pick up on from what Councillor Moody said. The first of those, I think, is the interpretation of the Braintree decision. And the Braintree decision effectively says that the term isolated is generally used to describe a location, and in the context of isolated homes in the countryside, it simply connotes that a dwelling that is physically separate or remote from a settlement. Whether or not a proposed new dwelling is or is not isolated in this sense is a matter of fact and planning judgment for the decision maker in the particular circumstances of the case. In other words, it's entirely about a matter of space rather than function. And what's notable is that there are a great many clusters of dwellings, hamlets or small villages that have no services, and whilst poorly related or located in sustainability terms, a house within them wouldn't be isolated in the ordinary terms. And you'll notice, of course, that this is a dwelling within a small group of buildings. So I don't think it could be described as being isolated. Even if as a matter of your planning judgment, you came to the view that it was isolated, then you would then need to think about TTV 26.1, because that also then goes on to say, well, if it's isolated, one of the permitted uses is the securing the reuse of redundant or disused buildings for an appropriate use. So that's the question of isolation. There was also a question mentioned, or the issue was raised in terms of fallback, and I think Councillor Moody quoted from the design and access statement. Now, the position on the fallback is that it is a material consideration, and the basic principle is that a real prospect doesn't have to be shown, nor does it have to be probable or likely. Effectively, a possibility suffices. Now, the wording in the design and access statement goes on to say, or I should say, the condition of the building after further examination is shown to be substandard, and to bring the building up to a modern day thermal insulation standards would be unsustainable given the amount of work required. That's the point at which Councillor Moody's quote finished. The quote continues, the simple truth of the matter is that it'd be better to renew the building rather than attempt to remodel it. That of itself opens up still the possibility of the building being the planning permission being implemented. But it was also noticeable that the agent in his representations said that planning permission couldn't be taken away and that a dwelling would be there, which would indicate to me that there is an intention or potential intention to rely on the fallback. So it exists as more of a possibility and therefore is a relevant material consideration. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Fairbairn. Well, Councillor Cheadle does still have a question waiting, and I haven't forgotten you. I do note that Councillor Renders did lose connectivity when Councillor Moody was speaking. Ms Young, who's very kindly doing the timekeeping, wouldn't have been able to monitor that, which is why things didn't pause. So apologies to Councillor Renders that wasn't picked up, and respect that you will need to abstain. Councillor Cheadle, your question, please.
Thank you, Chair. I regret to say this question is almost too complicated to ask, let alone answer. But I couldn't work out from what Councillor Moody was saying whether he was asking us to reject this application and thus allow the fallback application to proceed, or actually asking us to rescind the original application. Perhaps he'd like to qualify that. And the second part of the question, probably more for Mr. Weimer than Councillor Moody, is this original application was approved pre-JLP, I'm assuming, and this application is being made post-JLP. And I just wondered if the JLP has fundamentally altered the position of building on this site.
We'll come back to the question on that one because, as you say, that is for a planning officer, Councillor Cheadle. Councillor Moody, are you able to just answer the question from...
What I could say is that the previous planning application was incorrectly submitted to the wrong parish. It was sent to Lamerton as well as Tavistock. The ward members were not notified of it because they thought that it was in the parish of Lamerton. But at that time, the town council objected very strongly, and then the Lamerton parish supported it. However, the officer at the time only referred to the support from Lamerton and not the objection from the town council. So there's a bit of a pickle there. However, the same.
Councillor Moody, I'm sorry, but the question actually, which was from Councillor Cheadle, is to whether you...
I was about to finish.
Okay, please, if you could answer the question rather than...
The question is that the same objection as to the previous application, had the town council been able to put it, is the same this time, which is against the development on that site for the reasons given.
Right, thank you. Okay, so you're basically, it is you're asking this council to reject this application as it stands.
To reject the application, yes, please.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, are there any other questions for Councillor Moody? It would appear not. So thank you very much, Councillor Moody, for your time, and as with everybody else, if you could remain on mute, and are welcome to remain in the meeting. We have also had a message from Councillor Crozier, who says he was lost connection briefly, but doesn't think he missed anything of consequence. Again, could I have some guidance from Democratic Services on this one, please?
Thank you, Chair. Dara, if you're online, are you able to give some advice on that one? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's Dara White speaking. Members, we're obviously watching the participants list, and as of Councillor Renders, they're still showing as red as being online, so we can't pick up when Councillor Renders or Crozier dropped out, so it'd be incredibly useful if Councillor Crozier could just indicate when he lost connectivity, because it's not showing our end. Thank you.
Well, that's a new one. If people are looking as if they're staying online. Councillor Crozier, are you able to say at what point
Yeah,
you...
I came out at 12:33, sometime in 12:33, and I was back in 12:34.
Okay, I would think that was probably all right. Mr. White?
Yes, he just started his concluding remarks.
Okay.
It might be helpful with belt and braces and Chair if just repeat those concluding remarks for Councillor Crozier. Thank you, members.
And whose concluding remarks what was it that you were referring to Councillor Moody's?
Councillor Moody.
Yeah.
Right.
Where was I? If I read the last paragraph, all you need to do is to look at what the applicants themselves say in the design access statement. This is referring to the fallback. They won't carry out the fallback scheme because it would be unsustainable to bring the building up to current thermal insulation levels. So it would seem that for this reason, no implementation of that scheme will eventuate. And then I've gone on to say that. And as a result, the weight given to the fallback should be minimal. And then I've gone to say, Chair, ward councils and Tavistock councils were ignored at the first previous scheme, and we would like to urge you to refuse permission for the 3 reasons given.
Heard all of that. Yep.
Thank you very much, Councillor Moody. Appreciate that. Councillor Crozier, has that brought you up to speed?
Yes, indeed. I heard most of that. That was fine.
Thank you.
Chair, can I just step in for a moment? Thank you.
Yes.
Can I just ask if Councillor Crozier heard David Fairburn's advice, please?
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so that's the 2 registered speakers, as I've promptly got lost on my agenda with all that excitement. So now, any further questions for the planning officer at all? I think we've probably covered it all. Okay, so we have a recommendation which is on page 18. So I will move the recommendation to approve with the additional removal of permitted development rights for both extensions and ancillary buildings, plus that the applicant will demonstrate compliance with regard to renewable energy with the in line with JLP policy Dev 32. Councillor Pearce, are you happy to second that?
Hello, Chairman. Excuse me. Yes, I'm happy to second.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, we are now in debate. If anybody wishes to speak, please could you indicate? Councillor Hipsey?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just addressing the... we've had comments about the word isolated in terms of the Braintree judgment, and I'm still a little bit confused about whether we can really call this isolated or not. The planning officer's report states that the site cannot be considered isolated as it is located less than 1 kilometre from Tavistock. I've done the calculations here and actually walked the route. As far as I can work out, as the crow flies from the new Emden Grange development, the distance is 1.2 kilometres. By road, it's 1.3 kilometres. Both routes are greater than 1 kilometre. And also I point out the fact that when the last application was made, I don't think the Emden Grange development actually existed, so it was even further away from Tavistock.
Thank you, Councillor Hipsey. Councillor Cheadle.
Thank you. In the question session, I lobbed a question towards the planning officer, which I didn't get an answer to, about the difference in approval of the first application under the existing development plan at the time and the conditions that apply now under the JLP, and whether there's any material difference between the two.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, I have looked and understand that the original planning permission for the conversion of the bungalow was granted in July 2019. So that was after the point that the plan was adopted in March 2019. So the previous planning permission to convert the building to a dwelling was considered in the context of the existing joint local plan.
Okay. Sorry about that, Councillor Cheadle.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand that answer. Are you saying that the extant planning permission was granted prior to the joint local plan?
No, after. It was granted in July 2019.
So the joint local plan was in force at the time that the current application was approved?
Yes, the one referred to as the fallback.
Yeah.
Yes,
okay,
thank
thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mott, then Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chair. It's really difficult because I can understand the Town Council's concerns over its location and its apparent isolation. However, I do think we have to remember that there was a building on site there before, and before it was a clubhouse, it was a bungalow. Therefore, in that essence, in a way, it's kind of no different than a barn conversion would be in the countryside under Class Q permissions. So in that respect, I don't have a problem with supporting the application, and I welcome the fact that they have improved on the design put forward today. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we have to look at the bigger picture here. I can understand the ward member and the Town Council's concerns about the distance, but there's been a building on this site probably for 60 years, and the part of the clubhouse, which was the original bungalow, because of its age, is probably virtually impossible to refurbish, as the extant planning permission was to use the clubhouse and the existing part of the residential unit that was before the clubhouse came into being some 35 years ago. So, you know, I think we have to be very careful here and look at it how a planning inspector would look at it. And because of there was residential there before the clubhouse came into being, the age of that residential unit incorporated into the clubhouse would make it virtually impossible to reconstitute it back into a dwelling, residential dwelling, with today's building reg requirements. And I think that we have to look at what's before us today is a considerable improvement, fulfilling our green credentials with what was approved last July. So I think we need to be very careful here on how we view this. But the big issue is that, you know, the ward member and the Town Council are, you know, not happy with what's being proposed. But we have to realise that there's been a building on this site for probably since the 1950s. So it's a very long time, and you know, what we've got before us today is a considerable improvement, I believe, from a building regs point of view, to what was proposed and approved 12 months ago, well, nearly 12 months ago now. So I will be supporting the office recommendation because of those reasons.
Thank you. Councillor Hipsey.
Yes, I'm still concerned about the sustainable nature of this development. I understand that that sustainability hasn't changed substantially, but the fact remains that this site is not well served by public transport, walking or cycling. The road into Tavistock from the site is notoriously dangerous, and under SP2 Para 6, I think there's a good reason for objecting there. I understand that is has to be balanced against the fallback position, but in my mind, I'm still trying to get that balance right, and at the moment, I'm still very concerned about the routes into town from this development.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment? No. Okay, in that case, I'm going to take this to the vote. So what we have before us is a recommendation to approve with conditions, and I'm going to ask Mrs. Hoare again to confirm that members were present for the entire item and then take the vote for, against or abstain. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I will ask you in turn to confirm you are present and have heard all of the debate and then ask for your vote. Councillor Cheadle.
I was here all the time, heard all the comments, and I support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Crozier.
Although I dropped out for a very short time, I believe I heard everything in the debate and I support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Hipsey.
I was present throughout and heard, and I vote against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Mott.
Thank you. I was present throughout the presentation and debate, and I support the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Moyes.
I heard the whole debate and support the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
I heard the whole debate and I support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Ratcliffe.
Yes, taking into account the rerun of the officer's report between 12:10 and 12:15, I was present for the duration of the debate and I support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Renders.
Unfortunately, I wasn't present. I had server problems, so and I missed quite a few minutes of it. So in that case, I will abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Vachon.
Yes, I was here throughout, and I support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. And Councillor Yelland. Councillor Yelland.
Sorry, I forgot to hit my mute button. I was there throughout and confirm that I support the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. So that's 8 for, 1 against and 1 abstention. So that application is approved. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And yes, confirm approval of that particular application. So that leaves me to say thank you again very much to those, Mr. Rowan and Councillor Moody, for your input. It is very much appreciated. And just before I finally close the meeting, what I would just like to commend everybody. This has been our very first virtual planning meeting. There's a huge amount of work that's been going on behind the scenes in keeping everybody hopefully online. And I particularly would like to compliment and pay credit to our officers who I think have done a remarkable job. So thank you all very much, and I formally close the meeting, so the recording can please stop. Thank you.
Well done to you, Chair, as well.
Thank you.